Chapter 850. Elder He and the others were part of Yu Yuan's tribe. In order to defend against the Qinsang school, they had learned how to form formations under the guidance of the Devil sect. Thus, they knew the power of formations. Even though what they faced now was only a formation diagram, and its might couldn't compare to a true grand formation, its mysteriousness probably surpassed it. Thus, as soon as the four of them entered the formation, they'd withdrawn their magic treasures to protect their entire bodies. Not only that, when they flew, they looked over every step they took, and they were extremely cautious. Especially Elder He, when no one was looking, he secretly took out an incense burner. He held it in his palm and shook it gently. A thin wisp of smoke flew out, like a string tied to the entrance and exit door. This was a backup plan he left for his family just in case. Only when the setup was complete did he dare to follow the others in. The young Taoist saw them and smiled. This generation is quite careful. Then, he waved his sleeve and fiddled with the formation mechanism. The four of them heard a whimpering sound of the wind coming from afar, followed by thousands of lights flashing in the sky. After a short while, the sound of the wind suddenly became more rapid, countless fiendish smoke rolled over, within the smoke were thousands of Yin thunder, toppling the mountains and overturning the seas. When the four of them saw this, they were shocked. They all took out their talismans to protect themselves. However, after a while, they saw the light of their talismans gradually dim. They were actually contaminated by the Yin energy. They couldn't help but panic. They didn't cultivate the Qi path of Xianmen, so they didn't have many protective talismans. This time, they had only brought one or two. Looking at the situation now, they would probably be destroyed after a few hits. In the end, they could only rely on their own bodies. One of the elders said anxiously, "Taoist brother He, how do we defend against this?" Elder He had some confidence in taking on the task of breaking through the formation. Thus, he was considered calm among the group. He said, "Fellow Taoists, don't panic. This place isn't some great mountain guarding formation. I don't believe that such a large formation can be created with just a formation diagram. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to resist it long ago. There must be illusions mixed within. I happen to have a talisman with me that can break it." When the three of them heard this, they all urged him to take it out quickly. Elder He puffed his cheeks and puffed out a mouthful of black smoke. There was a small drum inside the smoke. As soon as it fell to his feet, it grew to his waist in a flash. This drum was called the Drum of Righteousness. It was a mysterious magical treasure that the previous clan elder had obtained from an immortal abode. As long as it was knocked, it would be able to destroy evil and expel evil. He picked up the drumstick and struck it with all his might. Thump, thump. Immediately, his voice shook the surroundings. Even the formation diagram could not conceal it, and it spread far and wide. More than half of the scarlet fiend lightning that was surging in front of him disappeared, becoming much sparser. After a few more knocks, it disappeared like a receding tide, leaving only 100 feet in size. It was no longer as overwhelming as before. The few Yu Yuan elders were overjoyed when they saw this. They were finally able to calm down and deal with it. But even so, their protective treasures were all destroyed by the baleful aura. The three of them had been working together for a long time, so they formed a circle, leaving only one person in the middle. Each of them circulated their energy and released a strong wind to fight against the evil energy and Yin thunder. Because each of them only had to face one side, if they felt that their magic power was insufficient, they would retreat into the circle. Then, he retreated into the circle and switched with another person to take his place. Meanwhile, he swallowed the pills and sat down to meditate. Just like that, they would not have to worry about a lack of strength later on. Elder He took out a star positioning compass that was used to identify Qi and said loudly, "Everyone, we are here to explore the formation, not to break it. Once we find out some details about this formation, we will retreat and report the situation to Spiritual Master Han. That will be considered an explanation." The three of them nodded and took the initiative to push into the depths of the formation against the baleful aura and lightning. With the help of the Drum of Righteousness, the four of them advanced quickly. They followed the star positioning compass and explored a few formation positions. But when they entered a deep formation door, the baleful aura and Yin thunder were many times stronger than before. They retreated in a sorry state. But when Elder He was retreating, he felt a whistling spiritual vigor sweep past him. But when he tried to identify it, it disappeared without a trace, as if it was just an illusion. His heart moved, and he silently memorized the location of the array formation. When the young Taoist in the formation saw this, he clapped his hands and said with a smile, "We can start now." Liao Daoren said, "These few demon cultivators are all fourth transformation realm cultivators, so they have at least 700 years of cultivation experience. If we can get rid of them and take their souls, qi, and blood, the treasure might be able to increase its power." The young Taoist said, "That's what I was thinking." He placed his palms in front of him and chanted incantations in his heart. Without spinning, a white jade bead curtain formed from spiritual qi hung down from the top, like a falling silver waterfall. With a light shake, layers of treasure light appeared and ripples spread out. A treasure map with a scroll floated out and spread out in a flash. On it were 8 qi and 8 doors, and each corner was embedded with lightning beads. There were 2 or 3 of them, a total of 20 of them. Each of them was the size of a goose egg, wrapped in golden light and contained clear dew inside, shining brightly. Liao Daoren saw that he could easily summon the formation treasure. He could not help but sigh and think, "Looks like the owner of this map is junior brother. Teacher shouldn't have passed it to me back then, but I've wasted a lot of hard work. Even my cultivation has been delayed because of this." This formation map was a secret inheritance of their lineage. There was a treasure in the formation called Yin Hua Qilan map. There were more than 30 seals on it, and they needed to lure Yuan cultivators into the formation, kill them, and feed them with their souls. Only then could it be removed and passed to the hands of the 2 of them. It had been more than 4,000 years, and now it only lacked the last seal to completely transform into a true weapon. At that time, the formation map outside could also transform because of this, and its power would not be inferior to a normal mountain guarding formation. When this map was in his hands previously, because of his aptitude, he could not summon it even after spending a lot of effort, so he could not fully display its power. This time, in order to stop the Xianmen cultivators, he could only hand it over to his junior brother. The young Taoist took the treasure map and opened it with both hands, waving it downwards. One of the elders below suddenly saw a white light flying in the sky, and guessed that it was a type of magic treasure. He did not dare to underestimate it, and quickly circulated all the mana in his body. His body suddenly grew, and he was about 10 feet tall. He raised the divine weapon in his hand, and blocked it. However, when this light came down, it was like 10,000 lightning gathered into one. With a boom, it immediately smashed his body into pieces, and even a few people beside him were shaken until their limbs were broken, and they flew out. The first white light had just landed, but the second one flew over, and this time, it was aimed at another elder. Another explosion sounded, and there was also no corpse left. Elder He immediately knew that it was not good, and he reacted quickly. He took out a spell, and activated the prearranged spell. He turned into a ray of clear light, and quickly escaped out of the formation. The remaining elder was a step slower, and he could not escape in time, and was also killed by a silver light. The young Taoist looked at Elder He escaping, and smiled. He did not chase after him, but shook the treasure map, and collected 3 strands of essence qi. Slowly, they merged into a ball in the scroll, and he circulated his mana inside. He saw that the last restriction had loosened a little, and he could not help but be happy. He rolled it up, and threw it back into the center of the formation to be nurtured. Elder He rushed out of the formation in a panic, and used all the strength in his body to rush back to the main formation. When he reached the Flying Star Palace, he saw Han Wanka, and truthfully described the situation in the formation. When he saw that the star positioning plate was completed, he handed it to a white-haired Daoren, and then said that he had used up too much mana, and so he went down to recuperate. Han Wanka asked, "Elder Jia, can you tell what kind of formation this is?" Elder Jia shook his head, and said, just based on this plate, there are hundreds of similar formations. Moreover, because of the different techniques of the different families and sects, their usage is also different. Unless one enters the formation, it is difficult to distinguish. At this point, he touched his beard, and said, but just now, the last place that Taoist he passed through was the exit of this formation. Unfortunately, he was only one step away from breaking the door, and reaching the spirit cave. Peng Yuzhou laughed coldly, and said, this time, Elder He's companions all died, and only he managed to escape, and even found the formation door. If you say that there is no trick in this, I do not believe it. Elder Jia nodded, and said, Shinran Peng is right, Daoren also thinks that there is something strange about this, but as long as this formation does not change, the formation door will not be changed. This, Daoren can guarantee with his life. Kai Rongju asked, Senior apprentice brother, should we send someone to investigate again? Han Wanka looked at the opposite side, and said in a deep voice, the circulation of spiritual vigor is getting faster, the remaining time is pressing, there is no time to investigate slowly. Since we have found out the location of the formation, I need to personally go and break the formation. He then turned to Peng Yuzhou, and said, Peng Shizhi, come with me. Peng Yuzhou hesitated for a moment, and then agreed. Han Wanka then called Shen Yinfeng over, and bowed, and said, Daoist Shen, when Peng Shizhi and I are not here, your cultivation is the highest here, please take care of our sect's disciples. Shen Yinfeng returned the bow, and said, Daoist Han, please rest assured. Han Wanka then walked to Lu Xiangying, and bowed, and said, Daoist Lu, I will make a promise with you, if we are not able to break the formation in half an hour, we will be in trouble, and then I will have to trouble you to help us. Lu Xiangying solemnly said, even if Daoist Han does not say, Xiangying will do the same. Han Wanka nodded, and after giving some instructions to Kai Rongju, Gu Tongshan, and Lu Yenni, he called out to Peng Yuzhou, and flew into the sky on the conveyance light. On the way, Peng Yuzhou suddenly said, Martial uncle, there must be a trap there, waiting for us to step into it. Han Wanka said in a deep voice, since Zhang Shizhi has entrusted this task to me, I will do my best. Once the formation door is closed, all our previous efforts will be ruined, even if there are thousands of people, it will be useless. As long as there is a chance to break the formation, I will go and try. Peng Yuzhou did not say anything, but his eyes flickered, and no one knew what he was thinking. After a while, the two conveyance lights passed through the mountains, and one after the other, they entered the void formation map in the sky. When the young Taoist saw the two of them finally enter his formation, his eyes lit up, and he rubbed his palms together. They are finally here, these two are great cultivators of Xian men, and if we kill them this time, the souls we obtain will be able to break the talisman restriction. Liao Daoren said, the lightning rays from the treasure map can break those Yao cultivators, but that is because they have a supreme talisman divine ability, and Han Wanka is a disciple of the White Sun sect, and his cultivation is deep, so it will not be easy to get rid of him, and that Peng Yuzhou is not easy to deal with either. It is better for junior brother to act according to the original plan. The young Taoist smiled, junior brother will not be rash. He summoned the treasure map back into his hand, and then looked down with a burning gaze, waiting for Han Wanka and Peng Yuzhou to reach the formation position, and then he will activate it. Chapter 851. Once Han Wanka entered the formation, he looked around and saw that the place was filled with baleful aura and lightning. He said, Peng Shizhi, I need to identify the location, please help me cover up a little. Peng Yuzhou agreed and layers of mana surged out. Flames flew and red light shone. Clusters of flames circled back and forth, easily repelling the baleful aura 1,000 feet away. Han Wanka saw that he alone was enough to deal with it, so he took out the star positioning plate from his sleeve to check the location of the formation. After a short while, he already had an idea in his heart. He kept the item in his pouch and protected it well. Looking at a direction, he shouted and circulated his mana to form a huge wave, forcefully breaking a path forward. Then, he waved his sleeves and said, Follow me. The two of them sped along the way. Although they encountered the fiery yin lightning from time to time, because both of them had the protection of the superior Xian Qi divine ability, the lightning was pushed far away before it could reach them. It didn't pose much of a threat, and soon, they arrived in front of the formation that had a special mystery. Han Wonka took out the star positioning plate again and used his heart to sense for a while. He said, if Elder Jia is right, the opportunity to leave the formation is here. Peng Yuzhou saw that they found this place so easily and did not encounter any decent obstructions. He felt something was wrong and said, Shu, there must be hidden danger behind this, should we be more cautious? Before Han Wonka came here, he had cast aside all his worries and was unmoved. He said with a determined expression, since we are here, we will just have to deal with it as it comes. Peng Yuzhou thought for a moment, reached into his sleeve, took out a magic sword and handed it over, saying, Martial Nephew has a formation-breaking mysterious sword here, it's called Shang Su. If this is really the location of the formation, with one slash, you will definitely be able to cut a way out. Han Wonka looked to the side and his eyes lit up. He took it and touched it. The sword was overflowing with colors, the coldness piercing into the bones. He shook his wrist lightly. A ray of light appeared and he couldn't help but praise, good sword. When he finished, he held the sword hilt and swung it down. As the sword went down, the surrounding heaven and earth suddenly trembled. Then, a shattering sound could be heard. Then there was the sound of a stone pillar collapsing. In a flash, the evil array that filled the air retreated like the tide. The thick fog in front of him slowly parted, and an empty door opened up. He only needed to sense it slightly. Then, he felt a surge of spiritual vigor howling in the sky. Han Wonka's eyes lit up and he stepped inside without hesitation. Peng Yuzhou hesitated for a moment before following. Just now, the two of them stepped out of the room. Suddenly, a rumbling sound came from behind them. Looking back, they discovered that the door they came from had disappeared. The vast and mighty spirit from before suddenly disappeared, as if it was surrounded by another formation. Han Wonka didn't seem to notice, his expression unchanged. But Peng Yuzhou couldn't help cursing inwardly. The young Taoist had been waiting for a chance to make a move. Seeing that the two of them had finally stepped into this place, he couldn't help but laugh loudly. You've finally fallen into my trap. Senior brother Liao, help me guard the formation door. Wait for me to use the treasure map to activate the true flames and refine them. This formation was divided into a mother and child formation. The formation in the mother formation was indeed the exit. But once one stepped out, there was still a child formation that needed to be broken. There was a mystery in this place. It was originally a furnace, and the Yin Hua Qilan treasure map was refined from here. It contained a bit of the treasure gold true flame. As long as it was activated, even magical treasures could be refined in one go. Previously, he went through so much trouble to use the power of this fire to kill the two of them. Then, he captured their primordial spirits to break the seal. Elder Liao responded in a low voice and operated the formation mechanism with all his might. He knew that the true flame required mana to be activated and it couldn't be activated in a short period of time. During this period of time, he needed to restrain the opponent. With this action, Han and Peng felt a heavy pressure pressing down on them. It was as if rings of chains were surrounding their bodies. They immediately activated their mana to resist the restraints. Not long after, a flame lit up in the sky. Although it was just a dot, it was bright and blinding. The light was as bright as the golden sun. Peng Yuzhou cultivated a fire attribute mystical technique, so he was familiar with fire attribute spiritual objects in the world. When he saw it, his expression tensed up. Not good. This is the treasure gold true flame. Han Wonka was calm as usual. When he saw the flame, he took out a curved neck jade bottle that was half a foot tall. Peng Yuzhou took a look and was shocked. This is the crane neck bottle. Han Wonka nodded. Yes. Peng Yuzhou was overjoyed. In the past, many people in the sect searched for this treasure. It seems like it has fallen into Martial Uncle Han's hands. With this item, this formation can no longer trap us. The crane's neck vase contained 1,000,000 outer heavenly heroes, each of which was personally refined by Li Gazhang. They were extremely powerful, and once they were thrown out, they could pierce through mountains and raise islands to the ground. Few magic treasures could block them, and most importantly, they were not as difficult to control as true weapons. Therefore, after the civil strife in Qingsang was quelled, many disciples secretly searched for this magic treasure. Han Wanka knew that treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. When he brought it out of the sect, he was afraid that if it was revealed, people would find an excuse to take it back. That was why he did not show it to others. But this time, in order to break the formation, he did not want to hide it anymore. He pulled out the stopper and poured it down. There was a rustling sound as the astral sand flowed out from the mouth of the bottle. It was colorful like crystal jade. At first, it was only a thin line. As he gradually used his mana, the sand swirled in the air. The sound became louder and louder. Everyone's ears were filled with the rustling sound as the sand spun rapidly in the sky. When the thousands of astral heroes came out, it was like the formation had to withstand the astral wind at all times. How could it be maintained? After a while, a loud sound was heard and the formation exploded. The two of them waved their sleeves to disperse the surrounding fog. They looked over and saw a huge crypt in front of them. Around it were altars that were as tall as hills. The altars were covered with banners and formation weapons. Many of them were connected with spiritual vigor. There was a faint malice in the air. They knew that they had barged into the entrance of the Devil's Cave. Peng Yuzhou had an idea. He summoned the plain sword and with a slash, the formation door behind him that was originally hidden was revealed. Han Wanka looked at him and said, "Nephew Peng, you can stay here. There is no need to follow me in. If I cannot return, with your ability, even if you cannot get out, you should be able to hold on until fellow Taoist Lu comes." Peng Yuzhou's mouth moved but in the end, he could not say anything. Han Wanka bowed to him and turned to go in. In the 9 smelting formation, Liao Daoren sighed and said, "I didn't expect that Han Wanka to have such a magical treasure with him. What should we do now?" The young Taoist said calmly, "Don't worry, we can't capture him here. Nephew Yang will make a move later. With the help of the 2 Taoist friends from Bon Yin's sect, we will be able to keep him here. However, we may not be able to capture this primordial spirit." When he said this, he could not help but sigh. Liao Daoren asked again, "That Peng Yuzhou is neither advancing nor retreating. How should we deal with him?" The young Taoist said, "After we get rid of Han Wanka, with Peng Yuzhou's nature, he will most likely escape. If we want to get out, the only way is to pass through the formation. That will be the best time to capture him. We will leave the formation door for him. There is no need to care about it now." Han Wanka had already flown above the Devil's Cave. When he was outside the mountain, he saw clearly that the mountain guarding formation had not been set up yet. It seemed like there were still a few doors missing. However, if he delayed any longer, once the formation was set up, unless Taoist Master Dong Tian personally attacked, it would be useless no matter how many people came. The only way was to break a few of the altars and destroy the formation. He took out the star positioning plate and looked outside. He found a place with dim spiritual vigor. It was obvious that the formation door had not been set up yet. Guessing that this was the key, he immediately opened a talisman that he had prepared beforehand. He leaped into the air and flew towards that place like a shooting star. In a faraway Dharma boat, Yang Poyu saw the ray of light flying across below. He sneered. Outside, he was worried about the dozen or so strength path demon cultivators. He was afraid that the sect's strength would be damaged too much, so he did not dare to send too many people up to fight. Now, only one person from Taoist sect was here. He did not need to hold back. He shouted, "Taoist Ji, Taoist Su, help me kill this person." Ji Huanchen and Taoist Su nodded at the same time. 3 rays of light flew up from the Dharma boat. They surrounded him and pounced downwards. Not long after, Han Wanka arrived above the several altars. At this moment, he also saw the 3 people coming towards him. However, he did not pay much attention to them and looked down. Although this place was not built yet, it was still very strong with the protection of the banners and talismans. If he used normal methods, it would be very difficult to break through. With the obstruction of the demon sect cultivators, it was even more impossible to succeed. Thinking about this, a trace of determination appeared in his eyes. He took out the crane neck guard and caressed it. If you can survive this time, go and seek refuge with junior brother Zhang. The magic treasure had already gained spirituality. It seemed to have sensed its master's thoughts and let out a soft cry. He smiled and tossed the jade pot into the sky. Then, he sat cross-legged in the air and made a hand sign. In an instant, a majestic spiritual wave surged out from his body and spread outwards. All the mountains and rivers started to shake. Yang Poyu was startled at first, then he suddenly realized what Han Wanka wanted to do. He said angrily, "Not good, quickly stop him." As he spoke, he could not care about anything else. He tossed out a black pouch and a ray of golden light shot out from it, covering the entire mountain of altars below him. When Ji Huanqin and Daoist Su saw this scene, their expressions changed. Not only did they continue to move forward, they retreated even faster. Han Wanka's eyes revealed a trace of melancholy. Thousands of years and the various past events flashed past his eyes in an instant. In the end, he suddenly smiled. In the next moment, a vast amount of magical power burst forth from his body in an instant. With a loud crack, it was as if the Milky Way had flowed backwards. Boundless floodwaters poured out and covered the sky. Moreover, there were countless, golden yang water manipulation true lightning, within it. Wherever the water flowed, there would definitely be shocking lightning that shook the heavens and the earth. Yang Poyu's expression was extremely ugly. Although he used his true weapon in time to protect himself, he acted hastily and didn't use enough Fa. Even though he was able to protect most of the altars, there were still a few altars that were blasted into dust. It would take at least half a day for him to stand up again. Peng Yuzhou saw everything that happened to him. He was silent for a moment, then he turned around and stepped into the formation door without looking back. The young Daoist's spirit rose and he said, "He's here. Senior brother, quickly open the door and lure him to escape. We can then take advantage of the situation and attack him together." Liao Daoren said, "This person has an array-breaking profound sword. Junior brother, you can't hold back anymore." The young Daoist nodded and said, "Of course." When Peng Yuzhou entered the formation, he raised his head and saw that the door in front of him was wide open. It was as if he could easily leave this place. It was obvious that the other party purposely opened up a path to lure him to escape so that he would lose his will to fight and then kill him with the least cost. He was sure that even if he reached the door, the other party would also have a way to stop him. In the end, he would just die in humiliation. A hint of contempt appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Do you think that I will escape?" When the sect was in chaos that day, he hid outside the mountain and escaped the disaster. During the sword battle of the 16 sects, he didn't come out because he was afraid of the fierce person. Now that the mystic demons were fighting and the 3 great tribulations were upon him, how could he escape again? He looked around and the contempt on his face became even more obvious. Then, he raised his head and said loudly, "Listen up, the one who will break your formation today is Qinsang Peng Yuzhou." As soon as he finished speaking, his body was already burning with endless golden flames. Under the shocked gazes of the young Daoist and Liao Daoren, the entire formation map had already turned into a sea of fire. Chapter 852. Since Han and Peng entered the formation, Lu Xiangying had been paying attention to the situation inside the formation. She expected that with their cultivation, even if they couldn't break the formation, it wouldn't be difficult for them to hold on for an hour. At that time, she could bring people to support them. Under the pincer attack, the chances of success should be quite high. However, just now a moment later, she suddenly felt a change in the formation. Then there was the sound of water shaking the mountains. Her beautiful face changed slightly. This is, however, not long after, he heard Peng Yuzhou's resolute words resounding through the mountains. Before his voice faded away, a shocking fiery light had already soared into the sky, and the formation diagram that was suspended above actually exploded in an instant. Lu Xiangying's gaze was complicated. She stared blankly for a long time. She didn't think that the two of them would be so brave and actually sacrifice their Dharma bodies to break the formation. At this moment, her mood wasn't calm. She took a deep breath, turned around, and said with a solemn expression, "The two fellow Taoists from Qinsang School are sacrificing themselves to break the formation. Yuan Yang disciples, follow me to kill the enemy." After she finished speaking, she turned the flying boat and turned it into a golden ray of light that shot into the demon cave. Seeing this scene, Du Shixuan's heart surged. He gripped his divine weapon tightly with both hands and leaped up. A streak of starfire shot into the distance. In the distance, one of the top 10 disciples, Chen Feng, also saw this scene. His expression was full of admiration. He pointed forward and said to the people around him, "Sage Han and Sage Peng are still risking their lives with their cultivation. As a junior of the sect and one of the top 10 disciples, how can I just sit back and watch? I have to move forward bravely." The three protector elders beside him looked at each other and said, "That's right." Although they were here to protect this disciple of the Qin clan. But now that the formation was gone and the spirit cave was exposed, they should take this opportunity to kill their way into the demon cave and make a great contribution. The towering cloud tower was the first to move out. It pushed aside gusts of wind and headed towards the demon cave. His action unknowingly led the others. For a time, the sky changed color. More than 200 Starhub flying palaces moved at the same time. Shen Yinfeng saw this scene. He could not help but sigh. In terms of cultivation, after Han and Peng left, he was the highest here. Even though Han Wanka left with a heavy responsibility. However, how did the Qinsang School cultivators act? But it wasn't something that an outsider like him could control. He could only let it do as it pleased. Fortunately, Zhang Yan had made arrangements beforehand. The Qinsang disciples who came were all protected by the Flying Star Palace. He could also retreat to defend. He only needed to carefully protect the back and guard against the heaven and earth locking technique. On the other side, there was a towering cloud tower that did not move at all. A Taoist nun on top of him appeared slightly anxious and said, "Master Feng, if you don't go forward, the credit will be taken by others." Feng Kong's eyes were as calm as still water. He said, "Then let them fight for it." The Taoist nun could not help but say, "Before we came out, Perfected Qin took care of us." Feng Kong looked at her and said quietly, "Perfected Han and Peng have only broken the stalemate, but the Devil's Sect has lost the formation. Do they really not have the power to fight back? If we go now, we will inevitably fall into a situation where everyone is fighting for themselves. We need to first gather strength before we can use our methods." The Taoist nun thought about it carefully and felt that it was indeed the case. She asked, "Then what do you think we should do, Perfected Feng?" Feng Kong said calmly, "Let's go to the Zhaoyu sect first." 500 kilometers away, there was an expanse of parasol tree leaves that were around an acre in size flying through the sky, and there was a cultivator standing on it. His shoulders were broad, his figure tall, his face white, and he didn't have any facial hair. He wore a crown on his head, and silk ribbons hung down from the sides of his ears. He wore a jade-green robe that emitted azure smoke, and his sleeves were rolled up behind him and fluttered with the wind, causing him to seem to overflow with spirit and a heroic bearing. This was the eldest disciple of the Taihao school, Do Hongping. After the sect found out that there was a real cave in the west of Fenglai, they knew that they had fallen into the Devil's Sect's trap, so they sent him out to help the Qinsang sect and the Primordial Yang sect to attack it. Due to the urgency of the situation, he went first while the others were still on the way. But suddenly, he felt a surge of spiritual vigor at the Devil's Cave in front of him, and the wind was blowing wildly. It caused the wutong leaf under his feet to tremble slightly. He looked up and stared at the front with a solemn expression. This strange fragrance was obviously caused by a cultivator in the third stage of the Yuanying realm breaking his Dharmakaya. Using this method to control the supernatural power, the power of the mana was more than 10 times stronger than usual. But usually, not many cultivators would do this because the power was too strong, and it was not controlled by the body. Once it was used, there was a high chance that their primordial spirit could not be protected. He frowned and said, "The battle has already become so tragic. Looks like I have to be faster." He immediately made a gesture, and the wutong leaf suddenly released a red flame. Its speed suddenly increased, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a rainbow and flew away. At the same time, in the Devil's Cave, Yang Poyu looked at the messy scene under his feet, and his face was a little gloomy. Previously, he had calculated in 100 ways, but he did not expect this to be the result. At this moment, there was no more cover outside. Even if they could block the Xianmen today, the disciples would definitely suffer heavy casualties. He turned his head and asked a disciple, "How much of the formation is damaged?" The disciple looked terrified, and did not dare to look at him. He lowered his head and said, "Although Master Xian Do is protecting it, many parts of the Dan are damaged, especially one of the doors that was almost completely destroyed, but it was rebuilt. At least, it will take until tomorrow." Yang Pingyu thought for a while. If he waited until tomorrow, the spirit cave might already be formed. But he wanted to use this to form a cave, so he must have the protection of the formation, or else he would not be at ease. He said, "Send more people to repair the altar, I want to see this formation in good condition tomorrow." The disciple did not dare to disobey, and immediately left. In the distance, a ray of light flew over. It was the young Taoist. When he came close, he said with a little embarrassment, "Nephew Yang, this time, the disaster of the altar was caused by my poor planning." At this moment, Yang Poyu's expression had already returned to normal. He waved his hand and said, "Man proposes, God disposes. How can you blame Senior Uncle Dao? Moreover, it was only a small setback, and it can't affect the overall situation. Senior Uncle Dao, you don't have to blame yourself. If you really take it to heart, you can kill a few more Xianmen later." Ji Huanqin smiled and said, "Although this formation is broken, Xianmen lost 2/3 degree realm cultivators. Although Lu Xiangying came, compared to just now, they are still weaker. If fellow Daoist Yang is ruthless, it is not impossible to injure them severely." Yang Poyu sneered and said, "At this time, there is no need to think so much. Everyone, follow me outside to stop the enemy." He immediately named a group of disciples and elders who accompanied him to protect him. He also called the dozens of cultivators who just now formation was broken. Dozens of rays of light flew out of the spiritual boat and went to meet the people from Xianmen. Lu Xiangying's golden boat was at the forefront. At this moment, she had already rushed into the demon's cave. At this moment, she felt a tide of spiritual opportunity surging towards her, and there were even rays of light flashing non-stop. She hurriedly activated the protective treasure light of the flying boat, and then reached down to use a heaven and earth sealing technique. Yang Poyu sensed it. He snorted, and without waiting for his mana to descend, he immediately cast a counter incantation and instantly dispelled the technique. Because he acted so quickly, the people behind him were not affected at all. The rays of light did not stop and continued to rush up. Lu Xiangying's expression turned cold, and she said, "This person is more powerful than the rumors say." After all, there were dozens of Yuanying cultivators on the opposite side. If they attacked together, it would be difficult for her to defend herself. Therefore, she turned the bow of the boat and turned into a ray of light to go around the side. Just now, the young Taoist had made a mistake. He immediately took out a treasure map and pulled it open, wanting to shine it on her. Just now Peng Yuzhou had broken the formation with his Dharmakaya, and the 9 smelting mother formation was already half destroyed. On the other hand, the Yin flower treasure Qilin painting was originally one with it. If there was no great opportunity, there was no possibility of it being upgraded to a true weapon. Therefore, he might as well abandon the formation and use it as a normal profound weapon. But at this moment, he heard a loud shout from the sky, causing his heart to tremble. Then, a ray of starfire light flew over from afar. He was clearly 1,000 feet away, but he suddenly rushed forward. He did not know what kind of supernatural power he had used, but in the blink of an eye, he was already in front of him. Then, he saw a big awl smashing down on his head. The young Taoist's heart trembled, and just as he was about to escape, he realized that his body was being held back by an unknown force, and he could not escape. He cried out in shock, "A cultivator of the path of strength?" His reaction was fast, and he immediately turned into a wisp of faint smoke. The big awl passed through his body, as if it had passed through an invisible layer, and did not hurt him at all. But this was not the end of the person's skill. A ray of divine light suddenly shot out from his eyes, and in an instant, this spell was broken, and his original body was revealed. The big awl in his hand stirred up a violent wind, and he swung it again. How could the young Taoist be willing to sit and wait for death? He spat out a grayish-white ball of air, and actually managed to block the awl. With this moment of delay, Liao Daoren had already caught up, and with a point of his finger, dozens of Yin thunder fell, and he shouted, "Back off." Another few Yuanying elders took out their magic treasures to attack from behind, and instantly, spiritual lights flashed in the sky. The young Taoist sneered in his heart. At this distance, a cultivator of the path of strength had too much of an advantage. If it was any other time, he would definitely be defeated in a few rounds, but now, he was not fighting alone, and the opponent was destined to miscalculate. Who knew that the person who came was so brave, and even though he was surrounded by more than 10 people, he did not care at all. Instead, he let out a loud roar and continued to attack. Under the young Taoist's incredulous gaze, a hammer hit on his chest, and he could not help but cry out in pain, falling from the cloud. Liao Daoren cried out in shock, "Junior brother." At this moment, a series of explosions sounded in the sky, and the person who came was also hit by many attacks. Even though his body was sturdy, he still could not withstand the combined attacks of everyone. His body was riddled with thousands of holes, and most of his body was so broken that it was almost unrecognizable as a human. But even at this stage, he still hung on the cloud, and did not retreat even half a step. He opened his remaining eye and looked at everyone fearlessly, and said proudly, "Donghua Demon Sect is only SOSO." Yang Poyu frowned, and said coldly, "So it's an unorthodox sect from another continent." He waved his sleeve, and a large ball of grayish-white smoke shrouded him. Lu Xiangying, who was in the sky, saw that he was so brave, and could not bear to see him die. She waved her hand, and a rainbow light fell down, wanting to save him. But halfway through, it was defeated by dozens of spiritual lights, and there were still many magic treasures attacking the flying boat. He could only retreat helplessly, and watch as the tall figure was swept by the white smoke, and his whole body was instantly turned into nothingness. Chapter 853. After Yang Poyu waved his sleeves, he frowned slightly. Once his phaseless aperture extinguishing smoke touched the body, it would corrode the flesh and extinguish the soul. But after this attack, he felt that it was slightly different from before. However, he didn't have time to check it now. He raised his head and saw several star palaces flying over his head. But after a while, more and more flying palaces appeared behind them. Obviously, the Qinsang sect cultivators had taken advantage of the broken formation to press forward. Lu Xiangying saw the arrival of the Qinsang school disciples, and her spirit was lifted. She roughly estimated the number of people on both sides and found that their strength was about the same. But what she was worried about was that the 6 demon sects had obviously put in a lot of effort here. It was very likely that there were more third-stage cultivators in front of her. The battle in front of her was not as simple as a fight to the death, but a chaotic battle. Usually, she would have to endure several attacks in a single move. Usually, she wouldn't be able to use her skills calmly. She wasn't afraid of the opponent's open attack, but worried about a sneak attack. If they came out at the critical moment of the battle, the consequences would be unimaginable. He thought to himself, why don't I activate the sword formation and attack with all my might? I'll think of a way to suppress the other side first. If I can delay Wen Shidi and his wife until they arrive, then I won't have to fear them anymore. After making up her mind, she controlled the flying boat to move back slightly and shouted, Yuan Yang sect disciples, listen to my command, set up the dragon-locking star sealing array. As she spoke, she tossed her hand, and a coiling phoenix sword flew out. It hovered in the air, and circles of light immediately appeared. The 20 or so disciples behind her heard her order and took out their sword boards. They landed around like stars surrounding the moon, and then made a hand sign at the same time. Instantly, thousands of golden lights flew out. The sky was filled with dazzling light, but they didn't fall down. Instead, they hovered in the sky. Looking at the positions of the sword lights, it seemed like there were stars resonating with each other. There was a mysterious spiritual vigor in it. Yang Poyu saw it. Seeing through the situation, Zhang Xian cursed inwardly. Yuan Yang sect's sword formation was amazing. If it was successfully set up, this battle would be much more difficult. He couldn't tolerate it. He was about to move forward. However, Ji Huanchen rushed forward and said solemnly, Brother Yang needs to take charge of the overall situation, so leave this to me and junior brother Su. There was no time for pleasantries. Yang Poyu nodded as a sign of thanks. Liao Daoren immediately agreed. Ji Huanchen took out a bone flute and blew it gently. Yin Qi rolled around him and sucked in a large amount of spiritual vigor. Then, the netherworld soldiers stood up one by one. At a glance, they were densely packed and there were no less than 100,000 of them. Suddenly, a shrill sound came from the flute, and 100,000 Yin soldiers turned into white light and shot up into the sky like arrows. In an instant, they collided with the golden curtain of light, and actually broke open a gap. However, the golden light was still stubbornly trying to close the gap. The two sides clashed continuously, and for a time, they fell into a deadlock. Daoist Su saw the opportunity and immediately turned into a rainbow and rushed forward. Yang Poyu's heart calmed down. He guessed that there was no problem here. He turned his gaze over and saw that there were several tall cultivators in the opposite formation. His eyes turned cold. Just as what Lu Xiangying had expected, other than the person who had appeared in front of them, there were two other third-stage realm elders in the array. However, if he came out now, he would definitely be obstructed by these beast cultivators and wouldn't be able to cause too much damage to the Qinsang disciples. The only thing he could do was to first push them out of the battle, then he could make a move on the rest. As for how to do it, he already had a plan. He leaped forward, and at the same time, he had already activated the Heaven and Earth Lock technique. Instantly, a surge of spiritual vigor descended and covered the surrounding 10 miles. As soon as this technique was used, all of the flying star pivot palaces aside from the lofty cloud tower came to a standstill. The cultivators inside were also unable to enter or leave, and the world seemed to have quietened down for a moment. Only a ghastly white smoke flew past, pressing straight towards the dozen or so demonic cultivators of Yuyuan tribe. Shen Yinfeng saw this, but he didn't make a move. Firstly, he was at the back and couldn't help in time. Secondly, Yuyuan tribe's beast cultivators had the advantage in numbers, and all of them were 4th stage strength path cultivators. If he rashly helped them, he might offend them. However, Yang Poyu was only halfway there when he suddenly sensed danger. He turned and dodged to the side, only to see a half-withered pine branch shooting past him. A devil sect cultivator couldn't dodge in time and hurriedly used his magic treasure to protect himself. But this thing actually pierced through the magic treasure, and even passed through his body. He couldn't help but let out a muffled groan and fell on the cloud. It was obvious that he had already lost his ability to fight. Yang Yangyu's expression changed slightly. He looked up and saw a parasol tree leaf standing in the cloud. On it stood a tall and sturdy cultivator with an awe-inspiring aura. His gaze focused and he said in a deep voice, Do Hongping. Do Hongping also looked over and said loudly, Fellow Daoist Yang, with your status, why bully those juniors? Our cultivations are similar, we are opponents. Yang Poyu pondered for a while. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't have any chance of winning against the eldest disciple of a sect. If he didn't get rid of this person, he wouldn't be able to escape. Thus, he nodded in agreement and said, "All right." He immediately took out a pair of jade hooks that looked like they were condensed from spiritual energy. He stretched out his hand and pointed. The hooks turned lightly and slashed towards the cloud. Do Hongping laughed loudly. More than 10 jade fruits the size of longans flew out from behind him. They were of different colors and each had a miraculous radiance. They rose several feet into the air before exploding and falling towards the ground. Neither of them thought of dodging or giving way. Both of them activated their mana at the same time, and the two objects collided straight into each other. A deafening sound immediately burst out. The treasure light from both sides only slightly separated, and then they fought again. In just a few breaths, the treasures of both parties had clashed over 100 times in midair. The vibrations were like thunder, the wind and malice spread far and wide. Those with slightly weaker cultivation felt their chi dynamic stagnant and their mana couldn't circulate smoothly. Shen Yinfeng took a look and realized that both of their cultivation were extremely high. They were just one step away from entering the state of grotto heaven. If they were to fight again, the outcome wouldn't be determined in a short period of time. Thus, he raised 2 fingers and drew across the sky. The spiritual vigor lock in the sky was instantly broken. The disciples of Qinsang sensed that the spell was broken and they all came out from the flying starry palace to look for their respective opponents. Not long after, the sky was filled with treasures of escaping lights. At this moment, whoever's escape technique was better and whoever's treasure was stronger would have a higher chance of winning. Shen Yinfeng thought for a moment and waved his sleeves. Hundreds of talismans flew out. These talismans couldn't defend against treasures and supernatural powers. However, if they were in danger, he could use his mana to save them. However, there was a distance between them. He took special care of the clear nether heavenly lake. The few talismans were refined using the secret method passed down by Shinchong. The others couldn't be compared to him. At this moment, he suddenly felt something. He turned his head and saw a rainbow flying towards him. He placed the horsetail whisk on his arm and stood still. When the flying light got closer, a Daoran appeared. He bowed to him and said, Daoist Shen, please enlighten me." At this moment, Chen Feng came out of the flying starry palace and was looking for an opponent. Suddenly, he felt a talisman floating beside him. He felt the overflowing spiritual chi in it and couldn't help but take a second look. He heard the guardian elder's voice transmission, "This is Jinren Shen's kind intention. Jinren Chen, why don't you accept it?" Chen Feng nodded and reached out to take it. He put it in his bosom and then flew away. Not long later, he saw 3 cultivators from the demonic sect surrounding a Taoist nun. The latter had a cultivation base of the 2nd degree realm and his cultivation base was not weak either. However, his battle techniques were lacking and he could only rely on a rainbow ribbon to defend himself. Every time this item danced, it would create patches of rainbow clouds and golden clouds, forcing the opponent to retreat slightly. That was why he did not lose. However, he could also see that the treasure consumed a lot of mana and wouldn't be able to last for long. Thus, he activated the Xuanzi mana and turned it into a rolling river. When the 3 of them were unprepared, it trapped 2 of them. The Taoist nun looked at him and said loudly, "Thank you, Jinren, for your help. If you are surrounded later, I will come and save you to return the favor." When Chen Feng heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. He thought to himself, this fellow Taoist is really strong. However, my Qinsang Xian technique isn't something that you cultivators from other continents can understand. Let me show you what I can do. With a shout, he lightly circulated his magical power. Immediately, the great tide stirred up balls of thunder and lightning, like a black snake slithering around. The magic treasures of the 2 demonic cultivators came into contact with them, and the treasure light was broken. One of them saw the opportunity quickly, and turned around on the spot. Using some unknown method, he actually broke free from the shackles, and turned into light to escape. The other was not so lucky, and was killed on the spot by the thunder technique. On the other side, Elder He looked around and suddenly had an idea. He said to the few elders beside him, "Everyone, later on, start shouting. We must create a commotion and pretend that we are rushing into the depths of the demonic cave. This will definitely attract the disciples of the demonic sect to attack. This way, we don't have to search for them and we can lure them over and kill them one by one." When the elders heard this, they all agreed that it was a great idea. With their abilities, they didn't have to be afraid of ordinary Yuan cultivators. However, because they weren't good at escaping techniques, they couldn't do anything if their opponents wanted to escape. However, it was different now. The demonic sect was guarding the demonic cave and couldn't escape. They could only fight them. At this time, Elder He solemnly said, "However, everyone, remember, if there are too many casualties among the Qinsang school disciples, I'm afraid it will be hard to explain to Jinren Zhang. Everyone, don't just focus on killing. You have to keep an eye on them." Everyone patted their chests and agreed. Then, they shouted and spread out slightly, heading into the demonic cave together. As soon as the commotion started, it caused the expressions of the people from the demonic sect to change. Many people anxiously rushed over to stop them. However, when these demonic cultivators gathered together, they were surrounded by strong winds. Once they got close, they would be sucked in. Then, several divine weapons would attack them. If they were lucky, they could escape. If they were not careful, they would immediately die without a complete corpse. No one could stop them from charging and killing. Just at this time, a ray of dark light descended. With a rumble, it was like a waterfall falling from the sky. It actually scattered the group of people. Elder He was shocked. He looked up and saw a delicate and pretty woman standing high up. Her hair was tied up in a high bun and she wore an apricot-embroidered cloak. Her lips were thin and her nose was high. Her expression was cold, but under her feet, there was a torrential tribulation water. She looked at the crowd indifferently and then looked in another direction. "Since fellow Taoist Chao is here, why not show yourself?" Chapter 854. In the sky, where there was nothing, there was suddenly a disturbance. A ball of clear air slowly swirled, creating a whirlpool. Then, a handsome and refined mystic cultivator in white walked out. He first looked around the field, then bowed to the female cultivator who exposed him, and said, "Greetings, fellow Taoist Lu." The female cultivator surnamed Lu returned the greeting and said, "I don't dare." At this moment, the situation on the battlefield suddenly changed with the appearance of these two people. The situation on Xian Gate's side was even more tense. Lu Xiangying's jade face was solemn. She hurriedly said to her disciples, "Withdraw the formation, leave quickly." Not to mention the devil sex people hiding in the dark, just from the surface, Xian Gate's side was at an absolute disadvantage. If these two people attacked, it was very likely that all the Yuan Yang cultivators on the boat, including her, would be left behind. Thus, she immediately gave up on the idea of setting up the formation and decided to retreat first. After the Yuan Yang disciples received the order, they didn't hesitate at all and put away their sword boards. They were originally competing with Ji Huanqin and Daoist Su. Now that they stopped, the other side's attack was like a collapsing tide, instantly pressing down on them. Lu Xiangying shouted and gathered all the mana in her body to block the two's combined attack. Then, she released hundreds of sword lights that were as vigorous as dragons. Each of them had the power to split the sky and the sun. Once such a fierce attack was used, the two people on the opposite side were immediately forced back. She waved her hand again and put away her sword board. Then, she took out the talisman and channeled her mana into it. With this help, the flying boat under them suddenly had a golden talisman flowing around it. Suddenly, like a fish leaping out, it instantly disappeared into the void. But after a breath's time, it reappeared a few miles away. Seeing this, Daoist Su smiled and said, "This is a small trick." He immediately took out a glass bone raft and lightly floated down. He formed a spell and was about to chase after them. However, not far away, Ji Huanqin called out to him, "Junior brother, there's no need to chase. Lu Xiangying's cultivation is not shallow. She hasn't lost her battle power. If you push her too far, she might fight to the death. Taoist Su paused and slowly put down his hand. He nodded and said, Senior Martial Brother is right. Just now, Han and Peng had self-destructed their Dharmakaya. Fear still lingered in their hearts. They had only come to help the Hunching sect defend the Devil's Cave, not to fight to the death with the Celestial Sect of Wonders. On the contrary, it was not worth it. Up in the sky, Do Hongping and Yang Poyu were fighting. Do Hongping glanced around and saw what was going on down below. He knew that if he continued to fight, it would be disadvantageous to him, so he had no choice but to take a step back. He leaped up and left the battlefield in a streak of green light. He said to the people below, Fellow Taoist Yang, why don't you go and greet them first? Yang Poyu stared at him for a moment with his sharp eyes when he saw him stop. Then, he slowly withdrew his transcendence energy and nodded. Fellow Taoist Do, please leave. I won't be seeing you off. He needed to use the spirit cave to achieve the cave later. This time, his real body was here, but his body must not be injured at all. Just now, he had been very careful during the fight and mainly focused on defense. He did not have any advantage on the battlefield. Now that the other party had voluntarily retreated, he could not ask for more. On the other side, Shen Yinfeng was also fighting fiercely with Liao Daoren. Seeing that the two of them had escaped, he knew that this was the end of his attack. He sighed softly and shook his wrist. He released a spiritual sword talisman that he had refined for a long time and slashed at his opponent's head. When Liao Daoren saw that he had two strong reinforcements, he wanted to hold on to his opponent and think of a way to kill him. However, suddenly, the spiritual vigor of the opposite party skyrocketed. There was a sword light that was tens of feet long in the sky. The sword light was so sharp that it seemed like it could cut him into two if it touched his body. He could not help but be shocked. Forced by the power of this technique, he could only temporarily avoid the sword light and hurriedly used his escape technique to escape. Shen Yinfeng took the opportunity to wave his horsetail whisk and transmitted his voice everywhere. The Devil's Doctrine's reinforcements are here. Everyone, do not continue to fight and retreat quickly. Elder He, please lead the troops to stay behind and cover the retreat. Elder He heard that he was asked to cover the retreat and could not help but complain. However, they had all been planted with the talisman and made a Dharma oath. They could not disobey the orders of Han and Shen. Therefore, they could only follow the order and stayed behind with a group of elders to protect the Qinsang school disciples as they slowly retreated. Fortunately, the Devil's Doctrine seemed to have some scruples and did not pursue. After the Qinsang disciples retreated from the spirit cave, he and a dozen elders shouted in unison and flew into the starry flying palace. Shen Yinfeng saw that there was no damage to the Qinsang school and felt slightly relieved. He thought for a while and called a disciple over. He instructed, go and invite the few spiritual masters here. Tell them that I, Shen Yinfeng, have asked them to discuss a strategy. The disciple bowed and flew away with the order. At the same time, in the spirit cave, Yang Poyu descended from the sky. He bowed to Chao Yu and the female cultivator surnamed Lu and said, thank you for coming to help. Please come aboard my flying boat to talk. The two readily agreed and followed him to the spiritual boat. Just now that they were seated, Liao Daoren suddenly appeared in front of the boat and complained, Martial Nephew Yang, since fellow Taoists Chao and Lu are here, just now, we only need to take advantage of the situation and we will be able to detain those people from the celestial sect. Why let them leave? The female cultivator surnamed Lu said, fellow Taoist Liao might not know this, but I was able to rush here with the help of a magic treasure. My magic power has been exhausted and I cannot continue fighting. Liao Daoren was startled. Chao Yu also smiled and said, that's right. Fellow Taoist Lu and I are similar in appearance. I borrowed the sect's magic treasure to rush all the way here and consumed a great deal of my divine energy. I'm afraid I won't be able to recover in a short period of time. Just now is just to scare them away. I've taken a lot of risks by appearing in such a hurry. If a fight breaks out, I might not be able to gain much of an advantage. Liao Daoren sighed and said, so that's how it is. It's a pity. According to what I know, many people from the celestial sect are also coming here. If we fight again, I fear it will be a bitter struggle. Chao Yu smiled and said, fellow Taoist need not sigh. We still don't know what will happen later. The female cultivator surnamed Lu looked over and said, since fellow Taoist Chao said so, could it be that you have some other method? Chao Yu nodded and smiled. This time, I have brought an item that can help us defend the spirit cave. Everyone looked over curiously. Liao Daoren couldn't help but ask, what is it? If there was an item that could decide the outcome of a battle, it would be nothing more than a magic treasure. And among the magic treasures, true treasures were the most powerful, but even a third-stage Yuanian cultivator wouldn't be able to freely control such magic treasures. As for the other items, they couldn't think of any use for them in a battle. Chao Yu smiled but didn't say anything. Instead, he looked at the other side. At this moment, the mystical demons and mystical demons were separated by less than 100 miles. They could clearly see each other's movements. After watching for a while, he said, you will know when the time comes. After Shen Yinfeng went up to the Star Hub Flying Palace. Not long after, Dou Hongping and Lu Xiangying were invited to this place. Elder Yuanyue was also called over. After exchanging a few polite greetings, then, they sat down. At this time, Lu Xiangying suddenly sighed. She blamed herself, just now, I'm only thinking about how to retreat. I lost my composure. Now that I think about it, I've fallen into a trap. Elder He was puzzled, what do you mean by that? Lu Xiangying said, that Chao Yu is in the demonic sect. He's on the same level as Yuan Hongyang and Bailey Qingyin. That Lu Rongyang is also a famous elder in the Netherworld Spring sect. Her cultivation is similar to that of Ko Yinglong. Just now, we're entangled with our opponents. If those two sneak up on us, we'll most likely be killed. But not only did they not do so, they purposely revealed themselves. It's obvious that they're trying to scare us away. Shen Yinfeng nodded, fellow Lu's words are not without reason. But just now, it's not a wrong move to retreat. This person has a magic treasure on him. If we continue fighting, we'll still be at a disadvantage. Dou Hongping said calmly, it's indeed not bad. A third-stage cultivator, even if he's bluffing, we still have the strength to fight. Moreover, just now, when I was fighting, I seemed to have sensed a strange aura lingering outside. It only appeared for a moment, but when I tried to sense it again, it was already gone. If we don't retreat now, there might be changes. Lu Xiangying's expression turned cold. I heard that fellow Dou's prominent virtue sensing technique can see through the mysteries of concealment within 100 feet. That feeling shouldn't be wrong. Since this person was able to avoid it, it's very likely that he's the eldest disciple of the Yuanshan sect, Jin Xianyuan. Dou Hongping said slowly, it must be him. Everyone's heart sank. If that was really the case, then the demonic sect wouldn't send 2 people, but 3. This would be even more disadvantageous to the profound gate. Shen Yinfeng stroked his beard, the demonic sect's strength is already much stronger than ours. Now that they've increased their reinforcements, we need everyone to discuss a countermeasure. Lu Xiangying said, the only thing we can do now is to delay our attack and wait for our reinforcements to arrive. Shen Yinfeng said, just now, a letter has arrived. Sage Shang is already on his way, but the demonic sect seems to be obstructing us. We don't know when he'll arrive. Dou Hongping said, Southern Flower Sect's brother Huang set off a step behind me for some reason. But looking at the time, he should be arriving soon. Lu Xiangying thought for a moment, then said, wait for me to write a letter to urge junior brother Wen and junior sister Wu to hurry over. She held her sleeve with one hand and stretched out her wrist with the other. She made a hand seal and instantly condensed a letter, then sent it out with a flick of her fingers. Elder He snorted, thinking to himself, if Sage Zhang was here, why would we need to wait for someone to arrive? We'd have already charged forward. Everyone waited for about 2 hours before 2 rays of light came from the sky. On them stood a man and a woman, both of them were handsome and elegant. Lu Xiangying said happily, it's junior brother Wen and the others. She stood up and leaped out of the flying palace, taking the initiative to greet them. But at this moment, the joy on her face suddenly disappeared. When the two saw her, they hurriedly greeted her respectfully, calling her senior sister. Lu Xiangying came up and stared at the two of them for a while. After confirming that they were from the same sect and not the demonic sex tricks, her expression relaxed a little. She said, Junior brother Wen, junior sister Wu, how did the two of you arrive so quickly? When Shujiang hurriedly said, sect leaders sense that something has happened here, so he gave us a talisman on the way. That's how we managed to arrive so quickly. But the other junior brothers are still on the way. Different from other sects, Yuan Yang's sect was too close to the demonic cave, so they were even more worried. Even though they were a sect leader, they couldn't bear to help their own disciples halfway through. Lu Xiangying grunted in agreement, then thought to herself, with junior brother Wen and the others, our chances are still not high. We still need to wait for Southern Flower Sect's brother Huang to arrive before we act. Chapter 855. After Wen Shujiang and his wife arrived, the Xian Gate cultivators waited patiently for another half an hour before the eldest disciple of Nanhua sect, Huang Songquan, finally arrived. In this way, Xian Gate had a total of 6 third-stage cultivators, only slightly less than the demonic sect. On the surface, both sides seemed to be evenly matched. However, everyone in Xian Gate knew that the demonic sect still had people lying in ambush. However, it was not impossible to deal with them. The Yuyuan demon cultivators were all 4th-rank cultivators. Although they were limited by their abilities and techniques and could not fight with a 3rd-stage Qi Path cultivator alone, they could display their strength to the fullest if they fought from the side. At this moment, the spiritual opportunity in the demonic cave was spinning faster and faster. The longer it dragged on, the worse the situation was for Xian Gate. They could not afford to waste any more time. Therefore, after Huang Songquan finished adjusting his breathing, they decided to make a move. This time, the 6 third-stage nascent soul realm cultivators took the lead and once again led the crowd to kill their way into the Devil Cave. Both sides were very close. Once Xian Gate made a move, the demonic sect knew immediately. On the flying ship in the sky, 7 third-stage Qi Path cultivators from the demonic sect sat together. Of the 6 sects, except for Shuashua sect, the rest had cultivators here. Lu Rongyang said, the Xian men are attacking again. Brother Chao, what kind of tricks do you have? Can you show them to our fellow Taoists? Chao Yu chuckled and no longer kept them in suspense. With a wave of his sleeve, a puff of smoke flew out and turned into a large vat in front of him. He stepped forward to open the lid and pointed at it, saying, the chance of victory lies with this item. Everyone looked at it with rapt attention and saw that it was filled with rice grain-sized black hairy short worms. Liao Daoren was surprised, is this the worm you are talking about? Looking at its appearance, is it a stiff worm? The stiff worm was a strange worm from southern cliff continent. The adult worm could grow up to 10 feet long and usually lived by eating gold and iron. After the worm died, its body was so hard that even divine weapons could not break it. If it was used to refine magic weapons, it could increase the metal property and was considered a rare treasure. Even so, no one could see how it could help the battle. Lu Rongyang looked at Chao Yu and said, fellow Taoist Chao, can you clear up your doubts? Chao Yu smiled faintly and said, this is not a stiff worm. Instead, it's the corpse of the vermilion candle insect. Vermilion candle bug? Everyone was shocked, and when they looked at the insect again, they simultaneously revealed vigilant expressions. Chao Yu stretched out his hand and took out an insect corpse. He pointed to a place and said, everyone, please look at this place. Everyone took a closer look and saw a bright red dot on the insect's head. It looked like vermilion lacquer, but it was slightly smaller than the eye of a needle. If he didn't intentionally remind him, he would definitely miss it. Ji Huanchen couldn't help but stand up from the bed and walk forward to take a few glances. He sighed in disappointment and said, so this is the vermilion candle worm. Back then, Martial Uncle Chi searched everywhere for this worm but couldn't find it. If I had found it earlier, I might have been able to form my heavenly abode. The vermilion candle bug was a descendant of the ancient sky demon, the sun-swallowing green locust, and it loved to devour the blood essence and spirit chi of cultivators. Once it locked onto its target, it would never stop until it killed its prey. Back then, there was a heavenly passage cultivator in the southern cliff continent who, by chance, obtained a vermilion candle king bug. Overjoyed, he refined it into a dharma treasure. After cultivating for 1,000 years, he declared that he would come to Donghua to compete with the grotto heavens of the various sections. However, before this person could even reach the Donghua continent, he was personally killed by Venerable Lingya of Yuxiao School. However, in this battle, half of the South Cliffs continent was devoured by the demonic insect, and a gap was opened in the southern part of the Donghua continent. Even the mountain gate of Yuxiao was affected. That was how the infamy of this insect spread throughout Donghua. Liao Daoren frowned and said, "Although this insect is powerful, it's just a corpse now. What use can it be?" Chao Yu said with a smile, "After finding these insect corpses, I've already found them. 3 heavenly passage cultivators from our sect placed it in the spiritual furnace and refined it again. Some of the techniques were left behind by that heavenly passage cultivator. Don't underestimate it." At this point, he pointed with his finger, and the corpses of the insects started to tremble. Then, their heads grew, and their bodies doubled in size. Then, their entire bodies turned red as if they were soldering iron. A pair of sharp mouthparts appeared at the front of their bodies, and they gradually looked ferocious. After a while, they became the size of a fist. It had already become the size of a fist, and with another pa-pa sound, the insect's back exploded one after another. 6 membranous wings stretched out from within and flew into the sky with a buzzing sound. Lu Rongyang suddenly raised her hand and released a tribulation water, which wrapped around 100 of them. After a while, she frowned. The sturdiness of these insects was far beyond what she had expected. Even her tribulation water could not wear them down. Chao Yu smiled and said, "Fellow Lu, although these things look like insects, they are in the realm of magical treasures. Your sect's techniques are indeed powerful, but as long as the spiritual vigor of this place is not exhausted, it can be replenished continuously. If you want to get rid of them, you have to cut off the spiritual vigor of this place first." Lu Rongyang shook her head. During the condensation of the spirit cave, the abundance of spiritual vigor was rare in the world. It was easier said than done. Unless one was a heavenly passage cultivator, it would be impossible. Chao Yu took out a few small bottles and threw them to everyone present. He said, "When these insects attack, poisonous fog will be released. Take this pill and you will be able to defend against it." After explaining the various taboos, he activated his mana. In a split second, countless demon insects flew out of the big vat and headed toward the top of the devil's cave. However, they did not go out. Instead, they hid on both sides of the tunnel, waiting for their opponents to come. The Taoist cultivators were very careful in their attack. The 6th third-degree cultivators rode on their instruments and walked at the front, ready to fight the enemy at any time. However, after entering the Devil's Cave for a few miles, they did not see a single Taoist cultivator. Everyone knew that there was something strange going on. Not only were they not happy, they were all tensed up. Shen Yinfeng said in a low voice, "Send a message to remind the disciples to be careful. Those guarding the back should be especially careful to prevent any changes. Just now was the time to arrange the battle formation." Therefore, this time the Qinsang school cultivators were here to fight for merit. Not many were willing to hide at the back. However, normal cultivators could not do such a thing. In the end, Lu Yenny took the initiative to stand out and led the disciples of Zhao Yu to guard the back. After the Taoist cultivators advanced for a few miles, they were getting closer to the depths of the Devil's Cave. The spiritual vigor around them became more turbulent, whistling and mighty. Even the flying starry palace started to shake slightly. As they advanced, a buzzing sound came into everyone's ears. After a short while, the sky was filled with insects. They were densely packed and countless. Many of them were lying on top of the flying starry palace. The scratching sound that was made when they were chewing was enough to make one's scalp go numb. Do Hongping's expression froze. He immediately used the heaven and earth lock technique to try and fix it. However, when he tried to pinch it, it was useless. He said in surprise, "These insects are not made of flesh and blood?" A bad feeling rose in his heart. Not long after, a flying palace was chewed through. A large number of poisonous insects crawled in through the holes. The person inside was an elder of the Qinsang school. He was not afraid when he saw the situation. He immediately spread out his mana and wanted to shake it away. Who knew that these demon insects were not affected at all? They swarmed up and swallowed him whole in an instant. After eating all the cultivators in the flying palace, the demon insects came out one after another. The number was much more than just now. At this moment, someone shouted, "Fellow Taoists, use the thunder technique to subdue it." The cultivators of the Qinsang school were all skilled in the thunder technique. With this reminder, they all used their arts and divine abilities. In an instant, within a radius of tens of miles, lightning flashed. However, not only did this not stop the insects, it made them even crazier. In less than 100 breaths' time, more than 10 flying palaces fell to the ground. The sky was filled with endless screams. As more and more cultivators were eaten, the number of demon insects increased. The number of demonic insects had also doubled, almost covering the sky and the earth. Seeing that the flying starry palace could not protect him, a cultivator from the Dongshin continent abandoned it and flew out. However, the demon insects were very fast. With a flap of the 3 pairs of membranous wings on their backs, they caught up in an instant. In the blink of an eye, they drowned him. Huang Songquan of the Nanhua sect thought for a moment. He waved his sleeve and released a large toad. The toad landed on the cloud and cooed. It opened its mouth and spat out a white gas. Instantly, hundreds and thousands of insects came over and were swallowed. Suddenly, his expression changed. A spotted sparrow flew out from his back. With a chirp, it spread its wings and carried him to a high place. In less than a moment, there was a loud bang. The large toad exploded into minced meat. 10 times more demon insects than just now flew out and chased after him. Huang Songquan used his arts and wanted to drive them away. However, these demon insects stared at him. No matter what he did, he couldn't kill them. In the end, he could only try to avoid them. At this moment, it was not only him. Most people were in the same predicament as him. There was only one place that was different. A green-clothed cultivator with a cold expression stood in midair. In front of him, there were thousands of sword gleams moving back and forth. Wherever the gleams passed, the demon insects fell. In an instant, their spiritual vigor was taken away and they died. The place where he stood was like a funnel. It kept sucking in the demon insects. Not long after, he killed tens of thousands of them. Liao Daoren was surprised and asked, "Who is this person?" Chao Yu looked at him seriously and said, "Based on his appearance, he should be Ning Chongxian, a disciple of the Qinsang school's Changguan Grotto Heaven. This person is ranked second among the top 10 disciples. He cultivates one of the 5 techniques and 3 scriptures of the Qinsang school, the Thousand Cloud Sword scripture. However, this person is only at the Yuanying level 2, so there's no need to worry." Everyone nodded. The vermilion candle insects could turn into tens of thousands of them after devouring one person. It could be said that it was impossible to kill them. At this moment, even if they went up, they would also be in a difficult situation like the Xianmen. Shen Yinfeng's expression was extremely solemn. If they went further in, even if people of his cultivation could still hold on, more than half of the accompanying disciples would die. He could not help but sigh and said loudly, "Everyone, this is impossible. Let's retreat." Lu Xiangying, Do Hongping, and the others shook their heads. So far, the other party's 3rd stage cultivator had not shown up yet. Just these demonic insects were enough to make them flustered. If they were to face the enemy in the insect swarm later, they would not have any chance of winning. The only thing they could do now was to find a way to retreat and find another way out. Under the cover of the 6 people, the disciples once again retreated from the devil's cave. Seeing that the Xianmen cultivators retreated again, Chao Yu smiled and said, "The situation has been decided. Even if the Xianmen has reinforcements, they will not be able to break through this insect barrier." At this moment, his heart suddenly moved. After sensing for a while, he smiled and cupped his hands at Yang Poyu, saying, "Fellow Yang, the opportunity is coming. We are here, you don't need to stay here. Quickly go in and wait for the opportunity." Everyone present nodded in agreement. They had all seen the power of the vermilion candle insects and did not think that the Xianmen would have a chance to break in. Yang Poyu thought for a while, then stood up and cupped his hands at everyone, saying, "Then I'll leave it to you all." After saying that, he turned around and went into the depths of the devil's cave. The Xianmen and the others had only entered the devil's cave for half an hour, but they were forced to retreat again. When they reached the outside, they looked back and saw that there was a black mass of insects behind them. Fortunately, they were only lingering in the devil's cave and did not chase out. Shen Yinfeng counted the number of people and his expression turned gloomy. In this short period of time, they had lost almost half of their combat power. Zhao Hozhou from Huanzhen sect, Tang Jin from Hanyuan sect, Pavilion Master Qian, and Elder Wang from Zhongtai sect were all dead. Even the fate of 4 demon cultivators from Yuyuan was unknown. Daoist Nun Wei, on the other hand, had lost an arm. She was barely able to suppress the insect poison with a secret technique, so she could no longer join the battle. At this moment, there was a sudden rumbling sound coming from underground. The spiritual vigor around them seemed to be stirred suddenly, and it was several times faster than before. When Xu Jiang was shocked and blurted out, "Not good." Everyone's expression became extremely ugly. This sign clearly showed that the devil's cave was about to be condensed. However, with the demon insects blocking the way, it was difficult to break in for a while. Could it be that this time, they could only sit and watch the devil's sect succeed? Just when everyone was at their wits' end, they suddenly heard a strange sound from the sky. It was as if a bolt of lightning was breaking through the sky from afar. When the people heard it, they could not help but be shocked and looked towards the source of the sound. As the sound got closer, it actually caused the surrounding spiritual vigor to boil. Everyone at the scene revealed a look of surprise. Based on the situation, it was obvious that someone was flying towards them. However, just by flying, it caused the spiritual vigor to shake. How strong was this person's mana? In a flash, there was a rumbling sound above the sky. The high clouds suddenly exploded and rolled out for tens of miles. Then, a ray of sword gleam broke through the sky and descended from the sky. Chapter 856. The sword gleam in the sky hung down halfway and the conveyance light suddenly disappeared. Then, a handsome young Taoist appeared in the sky. He had wide sleeves and a big cloak. The mana around him had not stopped. When he landed, it still shook the clouds. Jinren Zhang is here. It's senior brother Zhang. Many cultivators below immediately became excited when they saw the newcomer. Lu Xiangying looked left and right and saw that the Qinsang cultivators were all in high spirits, sweeping away the dejected look on their faces just now. She thought to herself, I didn't expect brother Zhang's reputation to be so high in the sect. Zhang Yan floated in the air and swept his gaze downwards. When he saw the location of the 6 Yuanying Stage 3 cultivators, he retracted his gang qi and descended. Shen Yinfeng immediately went forward to welcome him. Elder he did not dare to be negligent and went forward to greet him, greeting, "Welcome, Jinren Zhang." Dou Hongping and Huang Songquan looked at each other and stood up to greet him. After all, there were many cultivators in the Qinsang school. Now that the person in charge had arrived, even though they were the head disciples of the sect, they didn't dare to be careless. Now was not the right time. The devil's cave was about to condense, so a few pleasantries were enough. Zhang Yan looked at everyone and asked, "Why don't I see Jinren Han and Jinren Peng?" Shen Yinfeng sighed, the devil's doctrine has planned this for a long time. They have set up a protective formation here. 2 Zenrans have lost their Dharmakaya in order to break the formation and have died in battle. He briefly explained the reason and sighed endlessly. Hearing this, Zhang Yan's eyes flashed coldly, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded and said, I understand. Although his voice was calm, the people present who heard it all felt their hearts skip a beat. They all felt an indescribable chill in their hearts. Lu Xiangying thought for a moment, then said seriously, since Master Zhang has come, and we have seen the lineup, we are not inferior to the devil sect. It's just that the demonic insect in front of us is very difficult to deal with, and we don't know how to break it. Just now when we rushed in, we haven't even seen the people of the devil sect, and we have been forced out. Elder He hatefully said, those bugs are extremely annoying, the few clan elders were only a step too late in escaping. It was eaten. If we don't break it, it will be difficult to succeed. Do Hongping said in a deep voice, these demonic insects are not living creatures. They can be replenished by the surrounding spiritual vigor. It's extremely difficult to get rid of. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. He asked, what kind of demonic insect is it? Shen Yinfeng said, when I came out, there was no one around. Master Zhang, you can have a look at it. He opened his palm and saw that there was a small worm on it. It had 6 wings on its back, a naked head, a short body, and many legs under its abdomen. Its mouth was extremely ferocious. Zhang Yan took it and sent his spiritual sense into it. After a while, he knew what this item was. He pondered for a moment, then put it away. He said to the others, I have a way to break this thing, but this is not a good place. The Terror Demon sect is using a secret technique to eavesdrop, so it is not convenient for me to tell you now. I will tell you later. The others were startled. They didn't expect him to find a way to restrain this insect in such a short time. Do Hongping said in a deep voice, since Brother Zhang said so, then you must be confident. We don't need to ask any more questions. Why don't we do as Brother Zhang says? The others looked at each other and nodded. When Xu Jiang asked, when do we start? Lu Xiangying looked at Zhang Yan and said, Brother Zhang must have used up a lot of your arcane energy to get here. Why don't you rest for a while before we decide? Zhang Yan waved his sleeves and said, no need. The situation is urgent. If we delay any longer, not only will the spirit cave condense, someone from the devil sect will also take this opportunity to test the grotto heaven. We can't delay any longer. Let me make some arrangements, then we will start. He had the soul returning pill in hand. Although he encountered many enemies along the way, he didn't use up much of his arcane energy. After apologizing to the few of them, he gathered his disciples and passed down a series of orders. On the devil sect side, Chao Yu and the rest sensed Zhang Yan's arrival and their expressions weren't as relaxed as just now. They had received the letter earlier. On Zhang Yan's way, there were 3 people from the 6 sects who went to obstruct him. None of these people were nobodies, and they could be considered to be elders with deep cultivation in the devil sect. Even so, they did not slow him down, and they still allowed him to arrive before the spirit cave was formed. They were truly terrifying. Now that they saw that he was about to make a move the moment he arrived, they acted as though they were facing a great enemy and were all on high alert. Just now, the people from Qinsang school had lost Han and Peng, so they had lost a leader. Even though there were still a few third-stage cultivators here, most of them were cultivators from other sections. Hence, they didn't really trust him. When they fought with the devil sect cultivators, they fought on their own. But now that Zhang Yan had arrived, they had a leader. Instantly, their hearts were set and their actions were organized. Within 10 breaths, they had finished arranging everything. This time, the cultivators were simply divided into 3 groups. He was in the lead, the other 6 third-stage cultivators were in the second group. As for the group of disciples, they and the Yu Yuan tribe were in the last group. These 3 groups didn't charge forward at the same time like just now. Instead, they had to wait until the front group had broken through before they could move forward. Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said calmly, "Everyone, I'll make a move first." Lu Xiangying was well aware that if she was forced to retreat this time, she was afraid that she would lose the opportunity to suppress this devil's cave. Therefore, this first battle was the most important and could be said to determine the success or failure of this battle. She solemnly bowed and said, "Daoist Zhang, please be careful." Zhang Yan nodded slightly. With a wave of his sleeves, he soared into the sky. In the sky, a thunderous sword light streaked across the sky, speeding towards the demon cave. The people of the Devil's sect immediately noticed the movement here and immediately cast their gazes over. However, even though Zhang Yan had come alone, everyone present could feel a powerful pressure pouncing towards them. Looking at Zhang Yan's previous battles against the Devil's sect cultivators, he had never lost a single time. In the sword battle of the 16 sects, the elders of the various sects were all slaughtered by him. In the Battle of Starstones, he killed Feng Haiyang of the Netherworld Spring sect. And now, the souls of the dead under his sword included Bailey Qingyin. These people were all outstanding talents of the Devil's sect, but all of them were defeated and killed by him. Ever since Chao Yu arrived here, he had been calm and collected. However, at this moment, his eyes suddenly became fierce. It could be imagined that once such a person achieved the Grotto Heaven realm, he would be a terrifying opponent. He suddenly stood up and took a few steps forward. He stared at the conveyance light for a while, then turned around and said solemnly, "Everyone, that Zhang Yan is really a great enemy of the Devil's sect. If there is a chance later, kill him here." Not long after, Zhang Yan arrived in front of the Devil Cave. At a glance, he saw millions of insects flying on it, covering the sky and the earth, and their whistling was like a tide. His expression was calm, and he took out an inconspicuous talisman from his sleeve. This item was given to him by Shenbai Shuang, and its origin was extraordinary. Before the civil war in Qinsong, when he was ordered to go out to train, his master Zhui Yuming gave it to him. This talisman was condensed from the magical power of the clouds. Once used, it could take away all the spiritual vigor within a few hundred miles. Naturally, the spiritual vigor in the Devil Cave was endless, and it could not be stopped by a talisman. At most, it could delay it for a moment. However, this short period of time was enough for him to make a big deal out of it. Zhang Yan guessed that Shenbai Shuang's intention of giving this talisman was probably to predict that the situation here would be difficult, and in case it could not be salvaged, he could find a way to use it at the crucial moment when the Devil Sect cultivator was achieving the Grotto Heaven realm. In this way, he might be able to stop the path of Tao. In this way, even if the Devil Cave was formed, it would not be considered a complete failure. However, he was not prepared to do so, because the timing was not easy to grasp. There were at least 7 Yuanying third-stage grand cultivators, and some of them were even the eldest disciples of a faction. Their cultivation skills were outstanding among their peers, and they definitely had many magical treasures and spiritual items with them. No matter how good his prediction was, it was inevitable that there would be many variables. If this talisman was used to deal with the vermilion candle bug, it would be the best. Once the surrounding spiritual vigor was cut off, it would be like a fish without water, and it would be easy to subdue it. Other than this talisman, although he still had many ways to deal with the demon bug, there was no doubt that this method was the most effective, and it would be convenient for him to do things in the future. He used his fingers to clamp the talisman, and then threw it out. In a flash, a dazzling talisman flashed across the sky, and countless sword shadows floated, moving back and forth. In an instant, it actually took away all the spiritual vigor in this part of the heaven and earth. The entire spirit cave was originally surging, but there was a moment of pause. Zhang Yan was waiting for this opportunity. He shouted and spread out his mana, and with a loud bang, the sky was demonic and the earth was yellow, and the light of water was overflowing. With a loud splash, it expanded for dozens of miles, and for a moment, it only took one rush, and more than half of the demon bug was sucked in. Oh no! The people of the Devil Sect saw that he kept the demon bug, and they were all shocked. A few of them could not help but stand up. Although Chao Yu had expected that since the other party dared to come alone, he might have a way to deal with it, but he did not expect it to be so easy. His expression changed slightly, and then he laughed and said, "It's okay, there's no need to panic, I don't think the Celestial Gate will be helpless." He turned to Liao Daoren and said, "Fellow Taoist Liao, please find dozens of disciples here, I have use for them, it would be good if they are above the core formation level, it would be best if there are 1 or 2 Yuanying cultivators." Liao Dao was silent for a while, then he slowly stood up and sighed, "I'll go now." Spiritual Master Liao, Chao Yu suddenly stood up and solemnly bowed to him, and said, "This is all for the great plan of the Celestial Gate, in the future, there will be compensation for your sect." Liao Daoren said in a deep voice, "I understand, I naturally know which is more important, don't worry, Spiritual Master Chao." The vermilion candle bug only needed to devour the essence, blood, and flesh of cultivators to be born. Although there were no Celestial Gate disciples here, there were many Celestial Gate disciples. As long as they were willing, they could also provide a sufficient number of them. At that time, not only would they be able to reverse the situation, they could also plot against the Celestial Gate. He quickly walked to the back, called a few elders over, and told them the whole story. Finally, he said, "Now our 6 sects are like one, we will prosper together, we will suffer together, and Martial Nephew Yang will be able to use this opportunity to achieve success, I hope everyone can help him." A Yuanying elder suddenly said, "If we provide the demon bug's blood, the level of cultivation will be different, I think the effect will be different." Liao Daoren said, "Yes, with Yuanying cultivation, it will be suitable." The elder laughed and said, "That's easy, this old man's body is useless, senior martial brother can take it." Chapter 857. Zhang Yan kept most of the insects and dispersed his mana. His eyes scanned the depths of the demon cave before he turned into a sword and charged down. The cultivators from the demon sect were stunned when they saw that he didn't wait for the people from the mystic sect to arrive before he charged towards them. There was a 14 or 15-year-old handsome young man on the seat. He was the eldest disciple of the Yuanshan sect, Jin Xianyuan. He sneered, "This Shinren Zhang is too arrogant. He really doesn't care about us. Let's make sure that he doesn't return today." Chao Yu was still calm, he probably has something to rely on. Ji Huanchen muttered, "You're right, it's best to be careful. We've already made so many arrangements, so we can't ruin them. Brother Chao, go and refine that demonic insect again. We'll go and stop him." He looked at the crowd and said, "Zhang Yan is number 1 in the 18 sections. He can't be defeated by one person. To be safe, let's go and fight him together." Lu Rongyang said, "This person is not ordinary. Even Brother Bailey can't defeat him. He must have a lot of killer moves. There's no need to fight him to the death. We just need to delay him and wait for Chao Yu to refine the vermilion candle insect again." Everyone present nodded in agreement. After the agreement, the 4 of them flew up from their seats and went straight to the sky. Zhang Yan didn't go far when he saw 4 rays of light flying towards him. Each of them was rich in spiritual vigor and didn't lose to the strong cultivators he met earlier. He guessed that they were the few 3rd-stage cultivators from the demon sect. If there were only 1 or 2 of them, he would be able to defeat them in a head-on battle. But if the 4 of them worked together and used their magic treasures and skills, it wouldn't be easy to resist. The best result would be a battle of attrition. He had the sword escape technique and the 5 elements escape technique. If it was another situation, he could think of a way to break them apart. But the situation now was urgent and he couldn't be so calm. The only way was to use his divine power to suppress them. He shouted and the mana in his body surged. Yellow smoke rolled above his head. Suddenly, a big hand was formed. The 5 fingers stretched for more than 10 miles and pressed down. Lu Rongyang turned into a wisp of yellow smoke and rushed to the front. She faced the wind pressure above. Her lips parted slightly. With a light blow, a gust of wind blew, and a cloud of howling smoke was spat out. Although it wasn't fast, it was getting wider and wider. When the mysterious yellow hand was brushed by the smoke, it was like water passing through a sand barricade, constantly collapsing and collapsing under its erosion. Zhang Yan raised his brows. He recognized that this was the Netherworld Spring Sect's 9 Nether Great Sorrow Wind. Compared to Feng Haiyang that day, this woman's cultivation was clearly more profound. She should have already reached the 3rd stage of perfection. However, this attack was only to slightly hinder his opponent. The real attack was yet to come. When he came here, he saw clearly that this place was not deep into the devil's lair and was still connected to the sky, which was the best place to use the thunder technique. With a shake of his body, a purple aura shot into the sky. In an instant, clouds filled the air and thunder rumbled. Purple cloud, godly thunder. The 4 people from the devil's sect were immediately on guard. They stopped in their tracks and released their magic treasures to protect themselves. They knew how powerful this technique was. Among the top 10 disciples of Qinsang school, only Zhang Yan knew this technique. Once it was used, anywhere within the range of the technique, unless the person in charge withdrew their magic power or attacked with a powerful magic treasure, they could only passively endure the attack. However, they were confident that they could handle it. Even though they all had precious treasures, they were not willing to use them easily. In a flash, the lightning fell. Because of its ability to destroy evil, after a few strikes, the spiritual light of their protective treasures dimmed. However, none of their expressions changed. Every single one of them had a rather high status in their sects, and they never lacked magical treasures or spiritual objects. This time, they had prepared for this battle for a long time. If one was broken, they would just take out another. Even if Zhang Yan's magic power was inexhaustible, if he continued to use it like this, the longer the battle dragged on, the more advantageous it would be for them. Chao Yu looked up and said to the disciple beside him, "Go ask Marshal Uncle Liao if the people I asked for are ready." The disciple bowed and left after receiving the order. After a while, Daoren Liao rushed over and said, "Marshal nephew, I have brought them here." This time around, he went 1 round. There were a total of 4 elders who were willing to give up their bodies. Apart from that, there were 30 core transformation disciples. If not for the fact that time was tight, he would have been able to find more people. It was just that these disciples were confused and uneasy. Some of their eyes were filled with unwillingness. Some of them even looked at Chao Yu with hatred. These disciples were different from the few elders. Even if they couldn't enter the Yuanying realm, they still had a long lifespan to enjoy. But now, they were being asked to feed bugs with their bodies. How could they be willing to do so? It was just that they were forced by the power of the sect and had no choice. Chao Yu took in all the expressions of these disciples. He just smiled and didn't care at all. Even if these people weren't from the Jiuling sect, they were just at the core transformation realm and had no background. Before the grand plan of the spirit sect, their life and death were not up to them. He took a few steps forward and apologized to the 3 Yuanying elders, "Fellow Taoists, Chao Yu has been rude." One of the elders said, "Fellow Taoist, there is no need to be polite. Although you are here to guard the spirit cave, at the end of the day, it is still our Han Qing sect that benefits. As the elders of the sect, we owe you a favor. Let's do it quickly so that we don't delay the battle." Chao Yu said yes. He circulated his spiritual power and grabbed towards the sky. Instantly, several vermilion candle bugs were grabbed by him and sent out, "Fellow Taoists, please swallow them." The 3 elders grabbed it without hesitation and threw it into their mouths. Then, their bodies swayed, and their souls escaped from their bodies in time. Chao Yu solemnly bowed to them and thanked them. The 3 souls returned the bow and flew out hurriedly, preparing to be reincarnated. After a while, there was a rustling sound. Countless larvae the size of rice grains surged out from the bodies left behind by the 3 people. They buzzed in the sky and absorbed the spiritual vigor. In less than 10 breaths, they turned into adult insects. After a few rounds in the sky, they saw the dozens of core formation disciples rushing forward. With just a sweep, they were completely drowned without a trace. Their number increased by nearly 10,000. Seeing this, Chao Yu calmed down a little. He tucked his sleeves and hid the swarm of insects. At this moment, he paused and looked to the east. There were 6 rays of light flying over from the sky. He laughed and said, "You came at the right time." He turned to Liao Daoren and said, "Daoist master, fellow Daoist Yang is not here. Why don't you call your 2 fellow Daoists to come with us to face the enemy?" Liao Daoren said, "Okay." He immediately threw out a talisman. Not long after, 2 rays of light soared into the sky from afar. Seeing this, the 2 of them also rode the astral wind and soared up. Zhang Yan sensed that there was another enemy coming and immediately looked over. This time, he looked down. His eyes flickered slightly. Based on the previous situation, the person who wanted to use the demonic cave to form the cave was Yang Poyu from Hunqing sect. And now, any side that had one more 3rd stage realm cultivator would have an advantage. But this person still did not appear. Then there was a high possibility that he was already in the depths of the demonic cave. To wait for the heavenly secret to arrive. Based on his original plan, if this person was here, he would find him and kill him. Since he wasn't here, then he had to find him first. He said loudly to the 6 people who rushed over, "I'll leave this place to you guys." Do Hongping and the rest had already been taken care of previously and knew what he was going to do. They said, "Daoist, just go ahead." Zhang Yan immediately waved his sword light and turned around, suddenly escaping into the depths of the spirit cave. With his full strength, he just flashed and disappeared from the scene. Ji Huanqin saw him flying away and said in horror, "Oh no, the spirit cave is about to form, this person is probably going to cut off fellow Daoist Yang's path." Jin Xianyuan sneered, "Isn't that courting death?" There was only a narrow tunnel leading downwards. In order to prevent people from breaking in, talismans and spells had been set up and there was also a treasure suppressing it. It wasn't something that could be passed through in one go. In addition, there were dozens of Yuanying cultivators guarding behind. If they saw someone coming, they would just have to attack with their treasures and no one would be able to escape. Not to mention that the possibility of passing through it was very small, they only needed to cut off his path of retreat and there would be no chance of escape. Chao Yu, however, felt that something was wrong. He thought that Zhang Yan couldn't be judged by common sense. Even if the chance wasn't high, there was no guarantee that he would succeed. He decided to get rid of this entanglement as soon as possible and go back to deal with this person. Thus, he waved his sleeves and released a large number of Zhu demons. When Do Hongping saw this, he silently took out a gourd and sucked it in. Instantly, a boundless suction force was generated, sucking in all of it. Then, he immediately patted the stopper. In reality, this magic treasure could only hold the demonic insect for 100 breaths of time. Just now, because he couldn't see any hope of winning, he was reluctant to take it out. But this time, it was a matter of victory or defeat, so he didn't care about it anymore. Chao Yu sneered. He shook his sleeve and released a swarm of demonic insects. At this time, Huang Songquan shouted loudly, and the cloud behind him made a sound, releasing a red-eyed rock. It spread its wings, and in an instant, a gust of wind was set off, and the insects were swept dozens of miles away. Chao Yu slightly furrowed his brows, then relaxed. This kind of action would at most delay for a moment, but it would not be able to change the situation. However, at this moment, several figures from the flying palace descended from the sky. He raised his head to take a look, and his eyes narrowed. Not a single one of them was from the star pivot flying palace, but the 9 towering cloud towers. Although the vermilion candle insects could bite through the flying palace, they couldn't move this thing at all. His face instantly darkened. If these 6 people relied on this cloud tower to force their way in, they would definitely have to use true artifacts. Just now, they could break it. Wei Zihong stood on one of the cloud towers and said to Tian Kun beside him, "Senior brother, although the towering cloud tower can't be used by others after it is refined by one person, it might not be impossible. If Master gathers the 9 outside to Master, we can force our way in." Tian Kun said in a muffled voice, "We can't do it." Wei Zihong sighed, "Who said it wasn't? He was just thinking about it." Even if there was a way to do it, the other 10 disciples would agree, and the protector elders would definitely stop them. These disciples all had the possibility of becoming Grotto Heaven in the future, and if they died because of this, they couldn't escape the blame, so they definitely wouldn't let them put themselves in danger. Even at this moment, they weren't really going to charge in, but were following Zhang Yan's orders to create as much of an attack as possible, delaying the people from the Devil sect here so that it would be convenient for them to do things. Chapter 858. When Dou Hongping and the rest saw the arrival of the towering cloud watchtower, they calmed down and braced themselves to deal with the enemy in front of them. As long as they had this item, there would be a way out. Even if they were to fight with the demonic insects surrounding them, they wouldn't have to worry too much. They could avoid it and come out after a short rest. Just now, even though they also had this item, they weren't Qinsang disciples and had high statuses in their respective sects, so they couldn't ask for it. Luckily, after Zhang Yan arrived and explained the pros and cons, the other 9 disciples didn't resist, so both sides didn't lose face. After a while, Dou Hongping flicked his sleeves and suddenly threw the yellow-skinned gourd far away. But after a few dozen feet, it exploded with a bang. The thousands of insects that just now had retracted came running out from inside. Almost at the same time, they heard buzzing sounds behind them and saw a large black swarm of insects flying over from the sky. The demonic insects that had been blown away by the peng had returned. The 6 of them didn't panic and didn't even look at them, still calmly dealing with the enemy in front of them. Among them, Lu Xiangying and Wen Shujiang husband and wife suddenly let out a loud shout, the sword plate beside them spun, countless sword lights rushed out from it, the whole sky was filled with rainbow-colored sharp energy, there were also tiny golden lights about an inch long in between. The 3 of them were originally from the same sect. Now that they attacked at the same time, the sword lights in the sky shone brightly like a golden sun shining in the sky. It was grand and majestic, as if it was going to tear the sky apart. Chao Yu and the rest saw that this move wasn't easy to take and all retreated. Dou Hongping, Huang Songquan, and Shen Yinfeng didn't take the opportunity to attack. Instead, they turned into flowing lights and flew towards the towering cloud watchtower. When Shujiang couple saw that they retreated safely and flew hand in hand. They flew to the golden boat under Lu Xiangying's feet. The latter waved her hand and the golden boat leaped into the air. In an instant, it entered. Seeing this, the people from the demonic sect felt troubled. Priest Su turned around and said, "Brother Chao, what should we do now?" Chao Yu didn't reply and looked up thoughtfully. He discovered that these lofty cloud watchtowers were not advancing quickly. It was obvious that the other party was not willing to push too far, so he said, "It's fine. It seems that this person has no determination to charge in. He must have placed all his hopes on Zhang Yan." Lu Rongyang frowned and said, "But we are also trapped here and can't leave. Is fellow Taoist Yang going to ignore us?" Everyone present was put in a difficult position. If they really allowed these cloud towers to continue, they would definitely die. As long as he was forced into the depths of the Devil's Cave, he could rely on it to light up the clear spirit incense, and no one would be able to stop him. Thus, he could only keep a close eye on him. Right now, the safest method was to use a true artifact to break through. However, the other party was hiding in a cloud tower. It was obvious that they were gathering in one place on purpose, luring them to attack. This caused them to have no choice but to be apprehensive. This kind of magic treasure could only be used once in their hands, and the other side had 2 head disciples, so they should have at least 1 or 2 true artifacts in their hands. Since they had used it first, they had no way to restrict the other side. Priest Su sighed and said, "We can't advance or retreat." Liao Daoren pondered for a long time and suddenly raised his head and said, "Daoren, I have a way that might be able to solve this crisis, but it is not the right way." Fellow Taoists might not be willing to listen. Not far from him stood a beautiful middle-aged woman with ribbons on her arms. This person was also an elder of Hunqing sect. She sighed and said with a slight grumble, "Senior Brother Liao. What time is it now?" Since you have an idea, tell me quickly. Liao Daoren sighed and said, fellow Taoists, I just now paid special attention. Zhang Yan's 3 disciples are on the second cloud tower from the left. As long as we can break through this place and trap them, the others will definitely come to save us, so, at this point, he stopped talking. When everyone heard this, they didn't make a sound. Everyone knew that he was right. Zhang Yan was the key person to break through this formation. Not to mention what the cultivators of Qinsang School would do, the 6 profound gate 3rd layer cultivators would definitely not watch his disciple be killed. This way, they could be lured out and the vermilion candle bug could show its power again. However, bullying the younger generation was not a glorious act. They were proud of their status, and even if they agreed in their hearts, they were not willing to go along with it. Qiao Yu frowned deeply. To be honest, he was extremely disgusted with this idea, but this was a good way to break the deadlock. He looked up at Liao Daoren but did not say anything. Liao Daoren sighed and said, since this plan was suggested by me, it should be done by me. It is just that I do not have a suitable magic weapon. What can I do? He was not like Yang Poyu. Even the Yinhua Qilin painting that was passed down by his sect and painstakingly refined for thousands of years was also broken. Lu Rongyang was silent for a while and said, fellow Liao, I will lend you my Bei San Shalon. After saying that, she pretended to give it to him. Liao Daoren took a few steps back and waved his hand repeatedly. He smiled bitterly and said, fellow Liao, please don't joke. How can I control your sect's true artifact? Which true artifact didn't have a temper? Giving it to a junior disciple of their own sect to use was already something they were unwilling to do. If it was given to a cultivator from another sect, if it angered them and they killed them on the spot, they wouldn't be able to argue. Lu Rongyang, however, was unmoved. She shook her wrist and a white light flew out. Liao Daoren was shocked and hurriedly caught it. However, he found that the scene he imagined did not appear. He could not help but be startled and said in surprise, this is, Lu Rongyang said indifferently, fellow Liao, rest assured and use it. The true spirit of this magic weapon is already damaged and does not reject others from using it. Although it is not as good as a true artifact, its power is not weak. It should be enough to break the Cloud Watchtower. Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but look at it a few more times. A few of them revealed looks of admiration. The true spirit was damaged because someone used it to create a heavenly abode but failed. However, this kind of true artifact was sometimes the opportunity of a disciple of the younger generation. Because the true spirit in the room was like a piece of white paper, as long as it felt that the person's temperament was compatible with it, it would take the initiative to join. If the new owner's magic power was higher, they might even obey the owner's orders. With this kind of treasure protecting them, it was the same as having a few more lives. Liao Daoren took a deep breath and cupped his hands towards Lu Rongyang. Without saying anything more, he shook off the thin veil in his hand and said politely, please help me. A girl's clear voice came from the thin veil, damn it, Daoren, you look quite pitiful. Let me help you. What is the name of the person you want to capture? Liao Daoren changed his mind and said the name of Lu Yenny and the others. The girl said again, wait. The white veil spread out and instantly found one of the cloud towers. In just a moment, it spread out for hundreds of feet and then closed in, tightly wrapping around the cloud tower. Then, it started to twist. Shen Yinfeng saw that the people from the devil sect suddenly attacked one of the cloud towers. He stomped his feet and said, not good. Jinren Zhang's disciple is still on that cloud tower. Dou Hongping, Huang Songquan and the others were shocked. They didn't expect that the people from the devil's sect would abandon them to find trouble with the younger generation. If it was any other Qinsang disciple, it wouldn't matter. But it was different for Zhang Yan's disciple. He was entering the devil's cave alone and they couldn't take care of his disciple. How could they keep their face? The 6 of them knew that they couldn't just sit and watch, so they immediately jumped out of the cloud tower. Qiao Yu saw that they were indeed forced out, but there was no joy on his face. He shook his head and said, let's go too. After Zhang Yan got rid of the people from the devil sect, he flew down the tunnel of the devil's cave as fast as the wind. Along the way, he didn't encounter any obstacles. After a while, he saw a hole in front of him, and countless spiritual vigor was flowing into it. He sensed for a while and realized that this place was sealed by talisman spells, so he couldn't use the 5 elements escape technique to enter. It was obvious that this was the right way. If the devil's sect had set it up, it should be inside. He thought for a while and went in with the strong wind. After traveling for a few miles, he realized that there was nothing strange around him, and he didn't sense any living qi. He wanted to use the sword escape technique. However, as soon as he exerted his strength, suddenly, the surrounding spiritual vigor became extremely heavy, as if a mountain was pressing down on him. His eyes flashed and he immediately retracted his mana. He carefully sensed for a while and realized that there was an inexplicable qi surrounding him. Just now, if he didn't encounter it, it would be hard to notice. He thought to himself that this place should be restricted by some kind of magic or talisman. The faster he traveled, the stronger the obstruction. He looked up and saw that the tunnel was so deep that he couldn't see the bottom. He didn't know how long it was. Since he couldn't travel quickly, there must be someone blocking him in front. The reason why they didn't show themselves now was probably because they wanted to kill him halfway. This was a place that the devil's sect had spent a lot of effort to set up. They wanted to have a high chance of killing the intruders. Zhang Yan smiled indifferently. At this point, the arrow was already on the bowstring, and he had no choice but to release it. There was no reason for him to avoid danger or hesitate. If there was an ambush, he just had to deal with it. He waved his sleeves and went in with the strong wind. Thousands of miles away, thousands of feet underground, there were 2 Taoists sitting on top of an altar. One of them was 17 or 18 years old with snow-white eyebrows. He was Taoist Huan of Hunching sect. The other was slim, but her face seemed to be hidden in a layer of mist. She was Jinren Wei of Yuanming sect. Both of them were sitting with their eyes closed, using their arts to observe the situation of the battle. There were more than 10 third-layer cultivators from Xianling sect and Xianling sect in the true cave in the west of Fenglai Mountain. The battle was the most intense. However, the spiritual vigor here was too strong, and both sides were using their own methods to conceal it, so they couldn't see what was going on. They could only pay attention to other places. At this moment, the battle in the west was still ongoing. Although the Nether Springs sect had blocked the attack of the 4 sects of Xianling West, they were still outnumbered and were forced to retreat. Fortunately, the other 5 sects sent reinforcements in time, so they could still resist. At this moment, Jinren Wei suddenly felt something. He opened his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Someone has entered the crouching dragon vines I set up there." Jinren Wei grunted. After a long time, he suddenly asked, "If this person passes the crouching dragon vines, can Yang Poyu handle it?" Jinren Huan said expressionlessly, "It depends on him." Jinren Wei asked, "What happens if Yang Poyu doesn't pass?" Jinren Huan looked at her deeply and said calmly, "He who is capable will take the lead. He is not fated, so he can't blame others. He will just choose someone else." Chapter 859. The Cloud Tower where the 3 disciples of Zhang Yan were was originally Qin Nan's ride. Now that it was suddenly attacked, the expressions of the 2 accompanying guardian elders changed. One of the female cultivators surnamed Jiang said anxiously, "Spiritual Master Qin, the magical weapon on the other side is extremely powerful. I'm afraid the Cloud Tower can't withstand it. If it breaks later, Elder Chen and I will entangle the people from the Devil's sect and try our best to fight for a gap. You, Spiritual Master Lu, and the other 2 quickly rush out." These 2 were the elders dispatched by the Violet Light Courtyard. Both of them were in the 2nd Yuanying realm. Under normal circumstances, they wouldn't dare to block the attack of the 3rd Yuanying realm cultivators. However, before they left, the courtyard gave them a living golden target, which could even block a killing spiritual weapon. Qin Nan shook her head and said, "I have the rosy crimson flame gown given by my master. It can protect me, elders." Don't worry about me. Seeing her reluctance, Elder Jiang said anxiously, although spiritual master Qin has a magical weapon on her, there are 7th Yuanying realm cultivators outside. I'm afraid there are more than one who has a spiritual weapon. Don't get entangled with them. Elder He, who was watching from the side, was dissatisfied. He said loudly, Elders, with me and a few other clan members here, we will definitely protect spiritual master Zither and the others. Apart from him, the remaining elders of Yuan tribe were all here. They thought that even if their escape method was not good, if they just focused on defense, they wouldn't be able to take them down in a short time. Elder Jiang sighed. She also knew this, but since the other side dared to attack, how could they not consider this? In her opinion, only by taking the opportunity to rush out would they have a chance of survival. Being trapped here would only lead to death. Wei Zihong was a little annoyed. He originally had a magical weapon. It was just enough to deal with the current situation, or at least delay for a while. Just now, to break the formation, he was destroyed. Seeing that Tian Kun was silent at the side, he asked, Senior Martial Brother, do you have any ideas? Tian Kun shook his head and said, I'll listen to Senior Sister. Wei Zihong chuckled and said with a smile, Senior Apprentice Brother, you don't have to worry. Just now, Lu Yenny was sitting by the well, paying attention to the changes outside. He raised his head. He looked at Elder Jiang and said calmly, Elders, there is no need to be too anxious. I see that the devil sect's actions are not bad. Dang is using me as bait. Elder Shen and the others came over. They aren't really here to kill us, so we should be fine for the time being. Moreover, even if we rush out now, we will only fall into the devil sect's trap. She was the eldest disciple of Zhang Yan. She had also received personal guidance from sect master Qin Mabai on her divine abilities and Taoist techniques, so Elder Jiang didn't look down on her because she was a junior. After thinking for a bit, he slowly nodded and said, that makes sense. Since Taoist Master Lu thinks that escaping is the worst plan, then what should we do next? Lu Yenny said calmly, I can do the opposite. Once the cloud tower is broken, we will rush out together. If Elder Shen and the others use their strength at the right time, they will have the chance to disrupt the devil sect's plan. By then, we can decide whether to stay or leave. Elder Jiang and the other Elder Chen discussed for a while and said solemnly, Elder Chen and I think this method is feasible, but Taoist Master Qin has to promise us one thing. Once we get the chance later, it is better to escape as soon as possible and not to continue fighting. Qin Nan thought about it and said seriously, then we will do as the two elders say. At this moment, the sound outside suddenly became louder. The spell scrolls outside broke one by one. The entire cloud tower was shaking non-stop as if it could collapse at any time. Elder Jiang said solemnly, everyone, please get ready. After a few more breaths, the spiritual vigor in the surroundings suddenly tightened. It was as if a tidal wave of pressure was gathering inside. There was another loud sound that could split mountains. The cloud tower finally couldn't hold on any longer and it completely collapsed. Elder Jiang and Elder Chen shouted at the same time and released a flat disc that was glittering with golden light. The brilliance scattered and immediately enveloped everyone standing in the hall within it. Old Taoist Liao saw that he had broken through the cloud watchtower and immediately channeled his mana to retract the white muslin that was floating in the sky. This move was not to kill the person inside, but to restrain him. However, just as he was about to restrain him, he actually felt his strength stagnate. When he took a closer look, he found that it was blocked by a golden light. He was not bothered by it. Normal Yuanying cultivators were just struggling in front of him. To prevent them from escaping, he stretched out his hand and grabbed again. This was the heaven and earth seal technique. However, as soon as he used this technique, several talismans flew out from the inside. He laughed mockingly and waved his sleeves. A few smoke flew out and he used his mana to push the talismans to the side. At this moment, there was a loud shout coming from the cloud. It was a few Elder Yuan who rushed out with divine weapons in their hands. Elder Liao frowned and felt a sense of fear. He still remembered what happened to his junior brother just now. If a cultivator from the path of strength got close to him, he might even die here if he was not careful. Ji Huanchen smiled in the air and said, "Fellow Taoist, let me help you." He waved his sleeves and a rainbow light shot into the sky. It was so bright that the people who rushed over could not open their eyes. It was so painful that they quickly used their mana to protect themselves. After a while, when they looked again, they saw that there were more than 10 elder Liao in the surroundings. At a glance, all of them had the same appearance and expression. It was impossible to tell which one was real and which one was fake. The elders were at a loss and could only attack randomly. However, when they swung their divine weapons, they only raised a few wisps of smoke. After they floated to somewhere else, they suddenly gathered again and returned to their original forms, laughing coldly. Elder, he saw that something was wrong. If they continued to chase after them, they would only waste their mana. Just as he was about to call them back, Wei Zihong suddenly shouted from behind. "Elders, attack here." With a flick of his sleeve, he tossed out a crane head whistle, which hovered in the air for a moment before letting out a long and sharp cry. Then, he pounced towards a deserted area, but before he could even reach it, he was shattered into pieces by an invisible magic power, and Elder Liao's figure was also exposed. The other Yuan elders were overjoyed and they all rushed forward. Elder Liao snorted and suddenly turned into a wisp of smoke, dodging the attack. At this moment, Wei Zihong took out a fishing rod and swung it forcefully. The hook caught the wisp of smoke, and it stopped moving in the blink of an eye. Just now, Lu Yenny wanted to attack, but the other party would not just stand there and wait for them to attack. Now that she finally had the chance, she raised her sword pellet in the sky and slashed it down. Qin Nan also took out a dazzling blue-eyed phoenix hairpin. The clear cry of a phoenix could be heard in the sky, and the filthy smoke and air were all torn apart. At the same time, Elder Jiang and Elder Chen also attacked with their own treasures. Just now, Liao Daoren was slightly annoyed that a junior managed to get his hands on him. He looked at the treasures falling from the sky and sneered. He immediately took out a spell and heard a series of muffled sounds that sounded like the beating of a drum. Suddenly, a cloud of dust surged under his feet and spread out for a few miles. Elder He's expression changed and he shouted, "Earth-traversing dust. Everyone, dodge." Earth-traversing dust technique was one of the 3 supreme techniques of Hunqing sect. It was said that when practiced to an extremely high level, it could contain thousands of spiritual opportunities in the dust. Even though Liao Daoren had only scratched the surface of the technique, its power was still shocking. The cloud of dust rolled and expanded outwards. With a loud boom, the sound of an explosion traveled for dozens of miles. Not only did it push away all the things that came at them, it even sent the few Yuans who wanted to kill them flying. Wei Zihong's face turned pale and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He took a few steps back and quickly took out a pill to consume. After all, he was only in the 1st-degree realm. A 3rd-degree realm cultivator was not someone he could fight against. Just now, he was actually very lucky to be able to trap the opponent's cloud of dust. If it wasn't for the few treasured clothes on him, he might have been killed by this divine ability. Even though Liao Daoren had driven away his opponents, he could no longer use his mana to control the Bei Sansha muslin after he used this divine ability. The white light in the sky immediately slowed down, revealing a gap. Seeing this, Elder Jiang and Elder Chen's spirits rose and they quickly said, "This is a good chance. Spiritual Master Qin, hurry up and leave." Qin Nan was not willing to leave on her own. Just as she was about to speak, a force suddenly rose from her body and sent her out. She immediately panicked and said, "Spiritual Master Shixia, wait for a moment. I still need my fellow disciples here." An indifferent voice sounded in her ear, "Your master said that if you are in danger, I will bring you back. There is no need to ask you." She followed the force and rose into the sky. Once she reached the sky, she immediately attracted the attention of Chao Yu and the others. Lu Rongyang made a sound of surprise and pulled out her hand. She casually flicked her finger and shot out a yin thunder. Qin Nan's clothes suddenly lit up with a bright red flame. The light rippled and floated around. It was a pleasing sight to the eyes. The yin thunder had just arrived, but the flame burned away by itself. Then, there was a clear cry like a phoenix's cry. She suddenly turned into a golden red light and broke through the clouds in the blink of an eye. She went far away, leaving only a trail of flames in the sky. Qiao Yu took a glance and shook his head. This girl is one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsang school. She is not Zhang Yan's disciple. Let her be. Everyone nodded. Behind each of the top 10 disciples of Qinsang school stood people from the heavenly abode. Most of them had defensive spiritual weapons. Even if they were willing to use their killer moves, they might not be able to stop them. Moreover, Elder Shen and the other 5 were already in front of them. They had to deal with them and had no time to stop them. When Elder Liao saw that one of them managed to escape, he became even more furious. He felt that he had lost face in front of everyone. He thought to himself, since I have already made my move, why should I care about my reputation? I only need one Zhang Yan's disciple to hold Do Hongping and the others back. I can just kill the rest to avoid being tied up. After thinking about it, he let out a deep roar and raised his transcendence energy again. Hundreds of rays of qi appeared in the sky. He then pointed his finger downwards and slashed at the people below. Unexpectedly, a torrential river suddenly rose from below. The rays of qi fell into the river and disappeared without a trace. Not even a ripple was created. He could not help but be stunned. He looked over and saw a lady in white standing at the forefront. She was stepping on clouds with 3 clouds above her. She looked like a lotus flower. Her skin was like ice and her bones were like jade. Her expression was calm and tranquil. Beside her, there was a quiet pond. The water was vast and distant, the waves vast, but it wasn't as turbulent as when Han Wanke used it. Instead, it was serene and heavy, without the slightest momentum. Looking at it, it was dark and gloomy, deep and boundless, as if it could swallow everything in the world. Liao Daoren thought that this was the Xuanzi upper cave technique of Qinsang school. However, when he looked at it, he was shocked. He said, "This is the Northern Dark True Water." Chapter 860. Northern Dark True Water. Everyone present was moved. Even many of the Qinsang school disciples were shocked. This technique was known as hidden in the abyss, hidden in the dark day, able to take in the water of the heavens. Only the disciples of the Qinsang school's sect leader could learn it. If one didn't have such a background and could still learn this technique, then the person in the past had a great background and could be traced back to someone. After Liao Daoren's initial shock, he quickly calmed down. He sneered in his heart. The more important this woman was, the more impossible it was for the celestial sect to abandon her. He could just take her down and kill everyone else. He waved his sleeve, and the sky full of yin lightning struck down. The people below were all in his heaven and earth lock technique. They couldn't escape and could only take it head-on. He had heard that after the Northern Dark True Water was spread out, as long as the cultivator had enough magic power, it could be used to trap the Celestial Path technique. Just now, it seemed to be the same. However, he wanted to see how many times the other party could take his attack with her second stage cultivation. When Qiao Yu and the others saw him like this, they immediately made a move and suddenly launched a round of attacks. This move was to suppress the Celestial Sect's side, not giving them a chance to help. At this moment, Do Hongping and the others were not only being watched by the Devil Sect cultivators, they also had to guard against the countless vermilion candle demon insects that were biting them. For a moment, they had no choice but to stop and defend. Lu Yenny looked at the yin lightning falling from the sky. Her expression didn't change. The water beside her surged up, and wherever the water surged, it disappeared without a sound. However, the yin lightning was endless, like a heavy downpour. Other than protecting herself, she also had to protect Elder Wei and Elder Tian, as well as Elder Jiang and Elder Chen. In just a few breaths, she felt strained. Wei Zihong saw that something was wrong and said, "Senior sister, let me help you." He took out a flag from his sleeve and threw it up. The treasure fluttered in the sky, and auspicious clouds floated out. It blocked a lot of the yin lightning. Tian Kun also took out a small bottle without a word and shook it towards the sky. From the bottle, thick smoke that did not disperse was spouted out. It spread out like a cloud carpet and helped to reduce some of the burden. At this time, the two of them used their magic power without any regard for their lives. The two magic treasures shined brightly and attacked with yin lightning. His chest felt extremely tight, but he still gritted his teeth and endured it. Lu Yenny withdrew her hand at the right time and took out a few pills to consume. Her magic power was slightly restored. Right at this moment, a cracking sound was heard from the other side of the sky. It was the Bei San shot that had broken the Yingshan copper target. However, after doing this, he did not come down. After circling around the top, he seemed to be bored and turned into a white light, heading back to where Lu Rongnyang was. Elder Jiang could not help but heave a sigh of relief. If this true weapon continued to press down, no divine ability or Dao technique would be able to withstand it. She looked at Lu Yenny. He said, "If the three of you have flying magic tools, please leave quickly. Just leave this Daoren to me and Elder Chen." Lu Yenny shook her head and said, "We can't escape." The situation before them was much more dangerous than what she had expected. The 6 people from Daoist sect were forced to the outer circle and temporarily could not come to help. It was almost impossible for them to escape from a cultivator who was proficient in the 9 injuries hidden smoke escape. Elder He was a little dissatisfied and said, "This Daoist Jiang, why do you have to boost the morale of others and diminish your own? We have many people here. Even if we can't win against this Daoren, we might not lose." Elder Chen smiled and said, "Daoist Jiang is right. Daoren has met many devil sect cultivators in his life, but he has never fought a 3rd stage realm cultivator. Today, I want to see what's different." Lu Yenny calculated and said, "I have a countermeasure that I need to discuss with the 2 elders. I'll have to trouble Elder He to go up and hold him back for a while." Only Elder He and the others could still move within the heaven and earth seal. Elder He readily agreed and said, "Jinren Lu, don't worry." He jumped out and shouted. Suddenly, his body grew to a height of 10 feet and with a wave of the divine weapon in his hand, he slapped away a lot of the yin lightning. Then, with a leap, he raised his hands and smashed them down on Liao Doran's head. Liao Daoren was very cautious. He would rather stop for the time being than fight him head-on. He swayed his body and activated the hidden smoke escape technique. He turned into a wisp of smoke and easily dodged the attack. He had only avoided a few hundred feet when he suddenly felt an evil wind coming towards him from afar. He glanced to the side and saw that Elder Yu Yuan, who had just now been shaken away by the earth-sweeping dust technique, had turned back and were rushing towards him. These demon cultivators had rough skin and thick flesh. They were hit head-on by his divine power, but they were completely unharmed. He didn't want to get entangled with them. When they got closer, he picked up the incantation and released the earth-sweeping dust technique again. With a loud bang, dust billowed and he forced these people out again. At the same time, he shouted, "Daoist Chow." Chow Yu understood and immediately sent a lot of demon insects to entangle them. Including Elder He, these people were so flustered that they hurriedly circulated their arts to defend themselves. For a moment, they couldn't even protect themselves and were trapped. At this moment, Lu Yenny had already finished explaining the countermeasure. Finally, she said, "Elders, please try to protect yourselves later." They had the protective talismans that Zhang Yan had given them, so they could fight to the end. However, these 2 elders were different. Their cultivation was only similar to hers. If they were not careful, they could very well lose their lives here. Elder Jiang smiled. If she could escape death, she naturally didn't want to die. However, she was also prepared for any eventualities. Fortunately, Qi Nanyi had already escaped, so she didn't have any misgivings. She said, "Let's join forces and fight this person." Chen Chang Daoren said, Daoren, I still have a few disciples. We can't let them know that their master is someone who escapes in the face of battle. After Liao Daoren got rid of the demon cultivators, he instantly felt that his hands and feet were a lot more relaxed. He turned around again but saw that the ground below was covered with a layer of thick clouds. He couldn't even see the figure of the target and could only barely sense it. It was because he was fighting with Elder He just now. Wei Zihong and Tian Kun had been activating their magic weapons to create this kind of atmosphere. He sneered. If it wasn't for the fact that he needed to conserve energy to deal with those few demon cultivators just now, how could two mere first-degree realm cultivators stop him? He immediately activated his magic power and pressed it layer by layer. Once he used his full strength, Wei Zihong and Tian Kun couldn't withstand it anymore. They felt as if they were riding on a bumpy little boat, as if they would be crushed by a huge wave in the next moment. They had no choice but to withdraw their magic power and retreat. However, Liao Daoren had already made up his mind. How could he allow them to escape so easily? He pointed his finger and two grayish-white lights flew out and slashed at the two of them. The speed of this chi was incomparably fast. Compared to the flying sword, it wasn't inferior. Before the two of them could react, it had already landed on their chests. This was formed from a breath of pure chi that he had cultivated. In a battle, he could only use it 3 to 4 times. Now that he used it, he naturally acknowledged that he would take the lives of the two of them. However, just as the chi was about to touch Wei Zihong and Tian Kun, 2 talismans suddenly flew out. With a casual turn, it repelled the attacking magic power outside. Then, it casually swept the two of them up and easily broke the restraints of the seal. In a flash, it escaped into the sky. Liao Daoren was startled and immediately cursed in his heart. As disciples under Zhang Yan, the two of them had protective talismans on them. It was highly possible that Lu Yenny was carrying this item. If she also escaped later, wouldn't his plan fail? It seemed like he had to think of a proper plan. As soon as he thought of this, he was slightly distracted. Both Elder Jiang and Elder Chen were experienced and ruthless. They had been staring at the sky. At this moment, when they saw an opportunity, they did not say a word and attacked at the same time with their magic weapons. Liao Daoren snorted and wanted to use his magic power to force it away. However, at the moment when he moved his magic power, Lu Yenny decisively tore a paper talisman in her hand. A talisman that was more than 1,000 feet tall leaped out and hung high in the sky. In an instant, a vast spiritual vigor swept across the entire place. Liao Daoren was instantly fixed on the spot. Even the magic power on his body could not be used. At this moment, the 2 magic weapons had already attacked. He did not panic. With a call in his mind, a cloud of black fog suddenly appeared on his Daoist robe and blocked it. After all, he was in a hurry and could not completely dissolve the spiritual vigor on it. He was hit so hard that he let out a muffled groan and fell backward. Lu Yenny was waiting for this opportunity. With a turn of her mind, the waning moon sword pill turned into a light and flew towards him. At the same time, she gently waved her sleeve and the northern underworld true water suddenly climbed up around her. It turned into a long river in the sky and flowed forward with great momentum. However, if one looked closely, one could see that there were countless lightning rays in it. Someone from Qinsang school who knew about it exclaimed, Xuandu Lei Hong. This technique was one of the 12 supernatural powers of Qinsang school, but it was ranked last. The reason why it was so was not because its power was not enough. When this technique was used, one would need to use all the magic power in his body. Because it was a move to cut off one's own way of retreat, even if there were cultivators who learned it, they would not use it easily. At this moment, Liao Daoren had recovered a little. Just as he was about to escape, he suddenly felt a chill on his neck. He hurriedly used his magic power to go up and block it. However, this movement was delayed in the same place. Looking at the violent lightning river that was surging in front of him, his expression changed again and again. If this kind of supernatural power landed on the body, even if he did not die, he would be seriously injured and would not be able to fight again. He gritted his teeth and his body suddenly turned into a cloud of black fog, letting it hit him. With a rumble, wherever the water rippled, the lightning exploded, flashing hundreds and thousands of times in succession. Then, there was a continuous sound of thunder that shook the sky. After the sound, Liao Daoren stood in the same place unharmed, but his face was extremely ugly. Just now, he successively sacrificed 3 supernatural powers and sacrificed his Dao foundation to escape this disaster. He almost lost his life because of this. Being forced to this point by a junior, he had lost all his face. However, he still remembered what he had to do, so he forcibly suppressed his anger. Seeing that Lu Yenny was unable to resist at this moment, he immediately threw out a circle of rope, wanting to capture him. Lu Yenny sighed softly. The disciples of Hunqing sect could sacrifice their supernatural powers to save their lives. They were the most difficult people to kill among the 6 sections. Unfortunately, her northern underworld real water had not been cultivated to perfection, so it was not easy to move. Otherwise, this technique would be useless if she suppressed him. Just now, this attack almost used up 99% of her magic power. It was even difficult to use magic treasures, but she would not let herself fall into the opponent's hands. With a call in her mind, she activated the talisman, and a gentle magic power easily pushed the rope circle away. Protecting her body, she slowly rose into the sky. Above the sky, she glanced at the scene, turned into a rainbow light, and flew into the sky. Chapter 861. In the depths of the Devil's Cave, Zhang Yan was riding the wind as he advanced. Suddenly, he felt something strange in his mind. He paused for a moment and carefully examined it, but his eyebrows twitched. In this mystical demon battle, he had given Lu Yenny and the others 3 protective talismans in advance. Because the magic power within this item was too great, it wasn't something an ordinary Yuanying cultivator could easily control. Therefore, after he obtained it, he refined it again. But now, he sensed that the talisman had been broken. It was clear that his disciple was in danger and had no choice but to use the talisman to escape. The number of 3rd stage realm cultivators from the Black Demon sect and the Black Demon sect on the outside was roughly equal. With the towering cloud tower to rely on, the outcome of the battle couldn't be determined in a short period of time. Unless the other side had the intention to attack, their disciples wouldn't have been drawn into the fray so quickly. He thought for a while and his eyes turned cold. Then, he flicked his sleeves and continued forward. As he went deeper in, the area ahead became more and more tranquil. It would have been fine if it was somewhere else, but they were in the Devil's Lair, where spiritual vigor was fluctuating like a tide. This was extremely abnormal. He judged that the Devil's sect did not have the ability to set up a formation in such a short period of time. He thought that he was in some powerful magic treasure. After thinking for a moment, he took out a stack of talismans from his sleeve and tossed them forward. The talismans floated in the air. This talisman was given to him by Elder Shen of Guangyuan sect. He could attach a strand of his consciousness to it and use it to scout ahead. There seemed to be something strange ahead. They could detect it in advance. In the depths of the tunnel, there were caves on both sides of the stone walls. Dozens of Taoists of different appearances sat cross-legged in the caves. There was not much room for them to maneuver. However, there was a layer of golden light in front of them, isolating them from the outside world. At this moment, a cultivator in a brocade robe exclaimed in surprise. He turned his head and saw a talisman flying towards him. He sneered and pointed his finger. A fire arrow flew down and instantly burned the talisman to ashes. When a Daoist saw this, he flew into a rage and shouted, "Daoist Master Zhao!" Elder Chu had reminded him before. "How dare you act presumptuously without alerting the enemy?" Daoist Zhao laughed coldly and said disdainfully, "What do you know? That person outside was able to kill his way out of the hands of the spiritual masters. He barged into this place again. He was definitely not ordinary. If there's a secret technique hidden in this talisman paper and it escapes because of our carelessness, who will take responsibility? Is it you, Elder Zheng?" Elder Tsen couldn't help but be stunned. At the highest seat of the cave, an old man with long hair covering his face said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao's words are not without reason. Even if someone finds out about the arrangements here, it is not a big deal. It would be best if the person who came retreated." Someone below said, "I haven't seen anyone send a message for a long time. I wonder who it is." Because this place was suppressed by the dragon subduing thorn, all flying objects could not pass through freely. Flying letters were even more so. They could only rely on the disciples of the sect to communicate. However, it had already been more than 2 hours since the last letter arrived, and no disciple had come. As such, he didn't know what was going on outside. Taoist Xiao said indifferently, "Who cares who he is? We have over 50 Taoists here and we have the dragon subduing thorn to protect us. If this person dares to barge in, we will make sure he doesn't return." When everyone heard this, they all nodded in agreement. A few miles away, Zhang Yan squinted his eyes and was thinking of a countermeasure. Although he couldn't see the whole picture due to the restriction of the talisman, he had a rough idea of the situation in front of him. It seemed like there was no clever way to go through there. The only way was to force his way through. If he used the mysterious dragon's sun-embracing axe or the pearl of vitality, he would definitely be able to break through. However, these two treasures couldn't be used at will. The sun-embracing axe could only be used once every 60 years, while the pearl of vitality relied on the blood essence of the heavenly beasts in it. The more it was used, the less it could be used. If the other party had a countermeasure, it would be inappropriate. Moreover, he still had to deal with Yang Poyu later. This person most likely had a protective treasure, so he had to have a backup plan. After serious consideration, he took out the earth-splitting heaven and earth leaf and hung it above his head. Then, he waved his sleeves and moved forward. "It's coming." Elder Chu was the one with the highest cultivation here. Suddenly, he felt a huge mana approaching him, as if there was a mountain pressing down on him. While he was shocked, he was also extremely vigilant. He shouted, "Fellow Taoists, listen to my command later. Let's attack together and kill the intruder." To avoid any unforeseen events. Although some of the people below felt that he was being too careful, they also knew that this was a serious matter and they couldn't afford to be careless. They all obeyed his command and no one slacked off. They all looked in the direction from which they came. In a flash, a handsome young Taoist wearing a cloak came riding on the wind and clouds. However, they hadn't received an order yet, so they held their treasures in their hands patiently and didn't make a move. As soon as Zhang Yan stepped into the place, he looked up and saw dozens of cultivators standing on both sides of the path. However, their bodies were covered by a layer of cloud, so he couldn't see their faces clearly. Their cultivations were mostly in the first or second level, but he didn't see any third-level cultivators. Under such circumstances, it was best to use the flying swords to counterattack and force the other party to defend themselves. However, the flying swords here were also suppressed by the mysterious spiritual opportunity. Even if they could be used, they would not be able to cause much damage with the cloud cover. He looked at the other end of the path and judged that it would take at least more than 10 breaths to pass through here. This meant that in this period of time, he would have to bear the siege of dozens of people, and he wouldn't be able to fight back. There was one more thing that he had to worry about. The other party didn't know that his lofty cloud tower had been broken, so they might have some tricks to restrain it. If there was a treasure that could break the lofty cloud tower, it could probably kill him in one hit. As he thought about this, he only smiled and stepped forward. Under the gaze of dozens of people, he walked in without fear. Elder Chu sighed. Although they were enemies, he admired the courage that Zhang Yan displayed at this moment. He shook his head and said, "Why do you have to do this?" If Zhang Yan turned around and left at this moment, they might not dare to chase after him. However, entering this place was undoubtedly a dead end. A disciple beside him asked, "Master?" Elder Chu stroked his beard and nodded. "Let's do it." The disciple threw the talisman in his hand down, and immediately, a sharp whistle was heard. As soon as the whistle was heard, everyone took out the treasures in their hands. In an instant, dozens of spiritual lights fell at the same time. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. At this moment, as long as he made a wrong move, he would be defeated. A sharp light shone in his eyes, and he circulated his mana. With a loud bang, huge waves surged under his feet. However, only one or two of the treasures that flew over fell into the waves. Some of them were swept up by the waves, and most of them were still attacking him. A loud sound that sounded like a bell suddenly came from the heaven and earth leaf above his head. The sound was dense like a rainstorm, and the golden curtain of light shook incessantly. After 3 to 4 breaths, it wailed and turned into a ray of light, drilling into his sleeve. Once the defense above his head was gone, the 3 treasured cloaks on his body shone together to resist the incoming force. However, it only lasted for a moment before the light dimmed. Seeing that he couldn't hold on any longer, he calmly took out a treasure from his sleeve and threw it up. A 30-meter-tall pillar rose from the center of the sky. It was completely pitch black, and there were 4 flying blades at the top and tail. As it revolved, strands of multicolored clouds sprayed out, and a suction force was produced from within it. It actually forcefully dragged over a few magic treasures in the surroundings. After that, stellar sand surged up, and with just a stir, the magic treasures were completely crushed into powder. This 100 refinements heart-locking pillar was obtained by Zhang Yan from the Dongxing continent. It was personally refined by the small granary state patriarch. This item moved slowly, but it had great power. It was just right for this situation. Once this item appeared, none of the treasures in the sky could resist it. They were all forced to the outside, and he took advantage of the situation to advance forward. Elder Chu expressionlessly took out a talisman given by the sect and threw it out. In an instant, an inexplicable spiritual vigor flew out and brushed past the 100 refinements heart-locking pillar. The treasure could not help but tremble, and it suddenly lost its spiritual light, falling from the sky. This time, there was nothing in front of the treasures in the sky to stop him. Hence, they broke through the air and rushed towards him. Zhang Yan looked at the sky. Even at this moment, he was still observing calmly without a hint of panic. These treasures had different effects and sizes. Although they seemed to be launched at the same time, they were all different in speed. This difference gave him room to react. He had the nourishment of the soul-restoring pill, and he had the support of the 4th-tier perfected realm of strength path. As long as he could not be killed in one hit, he could continuously heal his injuries and break out of this place. He shouted loudly and activated the mind-restoring mystic art to the extreme. In the next moment, all the treasures smashed down. There was a loud explosion in the tunnel, and countless spiritual lights shot out. The surrounding mountain walls shook continuously, and gravel fell. The collision surged, and it seemed like it was about to collapse. However, what shocked the cultivators of the demon sect above was that in the midst of such a storm of attacks, the person who came did not fall and was still moving forward. Daoist Xiao saw with his own eyes that a treasure hit Zhang Yan's forehead, but it only caused sparks to fly. It only made Zhang Yan shake a little, and he stood straight again. He was shocked, and he pointed below and asked, who is this person? He's so powerful. The cultivator beside him also had a look of disbelief, and he said, from his appearance, he seems to be Zhang Yan from Qinsang School. Elder Chu saw that Zhang Yan was about to break out of the encirclement, and he immediately became anxious. He jumped up and bowed to the sky, and said, "Venerable dragon, crouching dragon, please suppress me." After a moment, a deep voice said, "I'll only help you once." The heaven and earth suddenly went silent, and everyone felt dazed. Then, a ray of cold light flew out of nowhere and leaped down from the sky. Zhang Yan suddenly felt a great danger coming towards him. He suddenly raised his head, and the center of his brows faintly twitched. Then, with a loud bang, a bright purple chi shot out, and collided with the ray of light. Boom! Suddenly, an earth-shattering sound came from within the cave. Everyone present was shaken by this shocking attack, and their chi activity became chaotic, and they fell to the ground. There were even 7 or 8 people who were slightly closer, and they were affected by the aftershock, and were instantly minced into pieces. At this moment, Zhang Yan felt his body lighten, and he turned to look. It turned out that one side of the tunnel was torn by the North Dark Sword Qi, and it seemed that the opponent's treasure was also damaged, and could no longer suppress him. He immediately leaped, and the sword rainbow rose up, and like a shooting star, he flew out of the tunnel in one breath.